afternoon. I'd like to call this work session of the Durham City Council to order at 1 o'clock on Thursday, April 22nd. Certainly want to welcome everyone here today, my colleagues and all the staff that are here today, as well as everyone who is listening today from home. Really glad to see you. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schewel.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Caballero.
Here.
Councilmember Freelon.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Present.
Councilmember Middleton.
I'm here.
Councilmember Reese.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. It's good to see everyone, colleagues. I'll now ask for announcements by members of the council, and I want to start with a couple of announcements myself. The first one is I attended this week a fantastic birthday party for the Reverend Mark Anthony Middleton. It was a surprise party for our esteemed colleague that started as a Bible class and ended up as a very large birthday party for him that was organized by his church. And it was cool to be the special guest and get to listen in. So happy birthday, council member. It was awesome. Truly, truly wonderful. And the music, and it was the best Bible study I've ever been to, and I've been to some. My second announcement is that, as you all know, we are in a very difficult situation as regards vaccine equity, not only in our country, but in Durham. 10 days ago, we heard a report from Rod Jenkins, the public health director. The most recent statistics I've heard that 44% of white people have at least one vaccine, 22% of Black people, and 17% of Latinx people. This means that white people are being vaccinated at twice the rate of African Americans, and even the disparity among our Latinx residents is even higher. I have been working on this over the last couple of weeks at a more intense rate, and discussing this with our city manager, meeting with community-based organizations, 2 meetings with community-based organizations. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson has been throughout the pandemic representing us on the African American COVID Coalition. Councilmember Caballero has been doing the same with Latin 19. So we've had good relationships with the community-based organizations throughout, and I know that other members of the council have as well. But with the new coronavirus variants, which are now, yesterday UNC said about 75% of the cases they're seeing there are from the new variants. They're more virulent. They hit people harder, and they're more contagious. And so we really, really need to get people vaccinated. The vaccines are effective against them, but we really, really need to get people vaccinated, and we all know that. The Councilmember Caballero and Mayor Pro Tem Johnson and I met again on Monday with the community-based organizations, and their biggest need is community health workers. There's a strong feeling that we need more community health workers in Durham. As you all know, we fund 10 community health workers along with the county, the health ambassadors, and the state funds a good number of community health ambassadors here in Durham as well that are organized through a contract with Quota Medicus, and they then administer those funds to about 9 Durham community organizations. Some of those are Peach, War for Life, La Semilla, El Centro, CARE, and there are several others that I could name, but I don't need to go through the whole list now. But this community health worker need is extreme and acute, and we are in a situation of significant urgency. And both our public health director, Rod Jenkins, who we met with this week, as well as the folks at Duke, as well as the folks at Lincoln, all agree that this need is very, very, very urgent. So I'm saying all this, colleagues, to say that in a couple of weeks, I would like your permission to bring to the council a plan and a potential funding proposal for next Thursday's work session. And I would like your permission to do that. So can I get some thumbs? Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate
think
it.
the county's going to be included in this.
Yeah, the plan would be to ask the county to fund half of it, and Rod Jenkins has been present and supportive. I think their funding, their participation is going to be crucial. So thank you, colleagues. I just wanted to give you a heads up about that and appreciate your putting that on the agenda for next Thursday. All right, further announcements. I see Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, colleagues, city staff, and Durham residents watching at home. Really want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for leading on issues around vaccine equity. I saw some of the same reports you did about a week and a half ago, and it is very concerning. And I'm really grateful to the Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Caballero for joining you. I'm very excited about the possibility of the city having even more of a role in getting more vaccine into the arms that need them, and we'll be looking forward to that proposal when it gets here. In that vein, I just wanted to point out that, excuse me, that the Durham vaccination site at the Wheels Fun Park, which, as folks may or may not know, was recently purchased by the city of Durham and will be where some community engagement around what to do with it is underway. But if I have anything to say about it, we will continue to operate the skating rink, although we might upgrade the bathrooms. In any event, Wheels is operating as a vaccination clinic for the county in a partnership with the city and county. And there are some times coming up, including at this very moment, when no appointment is necessary. You can walk in and get the first of 2 shots. And so that is today from 1 to 6 p.m., tomorrow 1 to 6 p.m., and the next week, Tuesday and Thursday, April 27th and 29th, 1 to 6 p.m. As you may have heard yesterday at the governor's press conference in the afternoon, he talked about what it's going to take for us to lift the remaining COVID restrictions, including the mask mandates. And that is somewhere and so we're going to need to get our vaccination numbers up statewide and here in Durham. So in conjunction with the work that we're going to be doing with additional community health workers, want to make sure that folks know that there's no longer any lines. The county's made its way through their waiting list. So folks can go over to Wheels this Thursday and Friday and next Tuesday and Thursday from 1 to 6 p.m. No appointments. It's free. You don't need insurance. You don't need to show ID. Just go and get vaccinated so that we can protect our families and our community. So that's really exciting and really important. The next announcement I'd like to make is that I got a haircut and I'm really excited about it. And finally, and perhaps most importantly for this day, today is Earth Day. Oh, before I get to Earth Day, Councilmember Middleton, happy birthday to you. I'm sorry that I couldn't make it to your celebration because I wasn't invited, but I just have to say that you make 60 look good. So keep trucking, my man, keep trucking. You got this. So in any event, back to Earth Day. Today's Earth Day. It's very exciting. And the mayor and I celebrated Earth Day today by going over to the operations and maintenance facility for Go Durham and unveiling the first 2 100% electric buses in the Go Durham fleet. It was a really great day, perfect weather, a little chilly. And we even had a political celebrity out there with us. North Carolina House Representative Zach Hawkins was there with us for the unveiling, very exciting. And I just wanted to spend a minute or two to talk about how great this is and how it's a really important aspect of our larger effort around environmental sustainability and transit equity here in Durham. Public transportation, as it is, already does a lot to help us meet the city of Durham's very ambitious environmental sustainability goals. It gets folks out of their cars into buses, so it reduces car trips, reduces tailpipe emissions, reduces congestion on our roads. Transit is great. The 100% electric buses that went into service today doubled down on that commitment to sustainability. They are super quiet, they have zero tailpipe emissions, and they dramatically improve air quality in the communities that we serve. We've got 6 more of these totally sweet new electric buses coming online to Durham by the end of the year. And while they do cost a bit more initially, these electric buses more than make up for it over time with the reduced maintenance and fuel costs because they don't use gas or diesel. Also, while I'm talking about this, many, many thanks to the Federal Transit Administration's Low No program for providing 80% of the funding necessary to purchase these buses and the associated charging stations. Thanks also to the Durham County Transit Plan, which provided additional funding. But today's unveiling of these buses was more about more than just shiny new toys for Go Durham, although those are awesome. These buses represent just a part of our city's accelerating transit investments in communities of color across Durham, communities that have been disinvested in for generations. These investments, in addition to electric buses, these investments include new crosstown service, more frequent service along the busiest lines in the Go Durham system, new bus shelters, benches, lighting, and passenger information systems to let folks know when the next bus will be arriving, new sidewalks and high visibility crosswalks, providing better access and safer access to bus stops in these communities. And also really exciting is the development of the new Village Transit Center in East Durham that will provide additional amenities for folks who ride the bus. That is one of our busiest transit stops, the Village Center. It's about 1,600 boardings a day, which is unbelievable. And so these investments, why are these investments so important? It's because these are the communities where our Go Durham bus riders live. Because for most of our riders, Go Durham is their transportation. More than 80% of Go Durham riders are people of color. Nearly 75% of our riders make less than $25,000 a year. And two-thirds of our Go Durham riders don't own a car. For those folks, and most of our riders, Go Durham is their transportation around town. And so that's why these transit improvements are so important. And so I want to encourage folks to understand that today's event for these electric buses was a lot of fun. Never pulled a tarp off a bus before. If you get a chance, take a look at the wrap that's on these buses because the design is amazing. So beautiful. But this is just a small part of the critical work that we are doing here in Durham, especially in Go Durham Transit, to make our air cleaner, our streets less crowded, and transit better and easier to access for our riders. And so just so you know, 10 minutes after the mayor and I pulled the tarp off these things, the first bus was in service on Route 3, our busiest route in the city. And I got to ride behind in the second bus. But when we got to Durham Station, the riders came off and they were so amazed at the ride that they had gotten. I don't know if y'all know, but our city buses can be kind of loud. These buses are not. The only noise that we heard in our bus was the rattling of a cabinet, and one of our staff members said he was really going to get to work on that because there shouldn't be any noise. It's very quiet, and obviously, as the buses go through our neighborhoods, they don't emit exhaust into these communities. Really an amazing experience. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about the exciting stuff that's happening today. The buses are awesome, don't get me wrong, but they're most important as part of our long-term investments in communities that have been disinvested in for generations and as a way to live up to our commitments around environmental sustainability. And we're going to keep doing more of this with the help of our state and federal partners. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for being out there with us today, and hope you guys get a chance to see some of these buses soon. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Council Member. It really was a great day. Council Member Caballero, did you have an announcement?
Just real briefly, I wanted to say, thank Latin 19, La Semilla, and the Latino Cooperative Credit Union for hosting a large vaccine site last Saturday where 450 predominantly Latino residents. It was in Raleigh, but we pulled residents from all over the area. It was extremely successful event and also very emotional to see so many folks walk in the doors, feel welcomed, know that they were going to have their language needs met and not have to worry about many of the barriers we are seeing around COVID vaccine. And I was excited to participate in that.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Council Member Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to also just take a moment and note, I appreciate Councilmember Reese's explanation on the Earth Day and the buses. I was unfortunately unable to catch you guys there. I didn't get to leave work until a little bit after the 10:45 time. But I did want to note that that those are the things that people in our community have been asking for a long time. And so it's really refreshing to actually see it come to fruition. I know folks at Wellens Village, who are my neighbors, are very excited to see some of the downtown amenities come east. And so just noting the signage, the bus shelters, the seating are all welcomed items, and I hope to continue to expand those out into areas like Bragtown and to our Fayetteville Street corridor and Merrick Moore areas as well, which is why I think it's pretty cool that we're bringing forward a green infrastructure bond conversation today. I did also want to note that I do have the very fortunate chance to catch up with Councilmember Caballero and Mayor Pro Tem Johnson at the Latin 19 and the African American COVID conversations on a weekly basis. These folks have been meeting since March, and I really want to take a moment and just thank them for all the work they've been doing to engage. I think Duke has played a really vital role in making sure that folks are hearing accurate information from resources across the city and the county who are of color, and not just people from outside the community, but people inside the community. I do appreciate the mayor bringing forward the community health workers conversation. I think that there's an underbelly in that we need to really make sure that it's supported, and building out the supports for how we build out our health and safety. So I left the Andrew Avenue area where a fire actually moved from Andrew to Driver Street, and I'm mindful of just how small fires can, or small, one house can have an impact on others. And so I just want to be clear, or be supportive in noting that for those folks who are there and our property owners, especially those who may not have insurance, I want to make sure that there are supports in place to make sure that their properties are restored. And I want to also just thank Superior Court Judge Josephine Kerr Davis for joining us on Tuesday. And I unfortunately didn't get to have Councilmember Middleton attend our women's panel. And I do want to say happy birthday as well. But we were excited to have the North Carolina League of Municipalities, Women in Municipal Governments annual conference, and Judge Kerr Davis was gracious enough to join us and swear us all in as officers on the board. So I did want to take a few moments and just say those few things. I also wanted to note that I think it's been a phenomenal community Halian effort to lift up on the vaccine equity side. I think War for Life has been conducting those vaccine sites across the city, including in Franklin Village and in East Durham. And I'm sure there'll be others on the list. But I think that it's going to take a lot more of us. And so just continuing to push in and saying that it can't just come from the city, it's got to come from folks in the community. And so please keep coming forward with your ideas. And I will be sure to make sure that I can support you as best as I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Councilmember Freelon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy birthday, Brother Middleton. I wanted to just give an update. I mentioned on Monday at the City Council meeting that I'm working with several organizations that serve young Black men and boys to develop a strategy for Durham. For those who weren't tuned in, 2021 is already kind of outpacing last year as far as shootings. And so this is an emergency response to kind of address the escalating and chronic issue of violence. And, personally, I've been in my individual capacity, boots on the ground in several parks, mostly basketball parks, every weekend since Joshua Garner was killed, the Hillside High School Hornet. And I've been meeting with folks. And so anyway, the Monday, I mentioned that I just wanted to talk about the past 4 days since then, since Monday's city council meeting. I met with City Manager Page on Tuesday. We had a great conversation about how to get something like this off the ground. And she connected me with the Durham's Office on Youth, with whom I met on Wednesday. And then this morning at 11 a.m., we had a gathering of about 20 coaches, public school teachers, business owners, mentors, farmers, all based here in Durham, all run by Black men, mostly Durham natives. I didn't realize that until the meeting, but most of the people in that space are from this community, from these streets, and know firsthand how to connect with our boys and navigate these streets. So I just wanted to thank and mention a few of those folks. Project Build was in the building, Village of Wisdom, Sankofa Farms, Blast, Black Men Build, National Youth Council, Durham Committee, ton of great organizations, Nation of Islam, Bull City Thunder basketball team, Charles Hamilton Houston Foundation, and many others. And just to testimony for y'all, to be on that Zoom call with all those Black men felt very powerful, like we're really kind of laying some important groundwork for the work that needs to be done. So I wanted to share just some really quick thoughts on that conversation, which will lead into some, I hope, some policy things that I'll be bringing before council after we do our community engagement work. But just some really high level stuff. Chief Davis, who we're gonna miss, has told us that most victims of gun violence are young kids. They're 14, 15, 19, 20-year-old kids, our boys, our Black boys. And when I say victims of gun violence, I'm not just talking about people being shot, but the shooters themselves are also victims of the violence of white supremacy and systemic issues that were designed to oppress them, which is why we as Black men, especially in the hip hop culture, that's why they call the hood a trap, So I want to name that violence as a source. That's my disclaimer. You'll hear that from me probably a lot when I talk about this issue, but we know our Black boys are at the center of this issue. And it's really important that we develop a plan and a strategy for Black men and boys that is informed by the boys themselves, by those boys in the trap, by those shooters. We need them in the conversation about how we can stop the violence and underwrite their dreams and ideas and things that they want to do and things that they don't have but they need. And we just haven't been having that conversation as a city, is what I'm learning. And when I met with the Office on Youth and talked to Laura Khalil, who's amazing and done a great job, I told her, Laura, I love your work. I read your report, your community engagement efforts are awesome. Like, how do we expand it, with a particular focus on Black boys? And I was so surprised to learn, I mean, maybe I should have known this, but I didn't. Our Office on Youth is 2 people deep. We have 2 employees in our Office on Youth. And, that's an interdepartmental office. So we're going halvesies with the county on our Office on Youth for a whopping 2 employees, which is mind-boggling to me, knowing where the points are where we need to, where we need to focus to address this public safety issue. So just wrestling in my mind, how much we spend on public safety and how, this youth piece isn't a central part of that public safety strategy strikes me as just an imbalance. And so I think we keep our communities safe by investing in our most vulnerable folks, and young Black men and boys definitely fall into that category. And I just wanted to express to the people of Durham, my number one priority, top priority, is stopping violence in Durham. So another thing that kind of came up in the conversations I've had is like, the county's doing a lot. There's Project Build and MBK, which is the President Obama's program, My Brother's Keeper, on the county side. And I think that the city has a bigger role to play. One of our goals in our strategic plan is creating safer communities together. And there's a lot of redundancies between city and county. Like we have a sheriff's office and a police department that spend a whopping 100 million every year collectively. So if there was a place that needed a double tap and some efforts on the city side to supplement and to build on foundations and things that are already happening in the county, I think young Black men and boys would be that area. So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to share. You know, that a 2 to 500, so 2 members in our Office on Youth versus, you know, 557 folks in our police department, that balance is not going to get us the results that we want when we know that Black boys are so central and in the middle of the solutions to solving violence in our community. So that doesn't, those numbers don't reflect my values. And as a city council member, I'll be using you know, whatever influence or efforts that I have to try to restore some balance and to bring more folks into our Office on Youth to help address some of these issues. So I just wanted to, you know, kind of project that, to speak it into existence, to share with my colleagues and also share with our community members where my head's at and the urgent feelings and strategies that are being employed to address what is outpacing 2020, which was a record year for shootings in Durham so far. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me some time to share that. And you'll be hearing a lot more about that from me in the weeks to come.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, friends and everyone watching at home. Councilor Freeman, thank you so much for to you and your colleagues at Women in Municipal Government for the invitation, the panel discussion. I'm so sorry that I couldn't make it. There was an overlap in schedule, but it's certainly not reflective of the regard I have for the work that Women in Municipal Government do. So apologies and thank them so much for the invitation to participate in the panel. And to Brother Freelon, thank you so much for your words. I want to say publicly what I've committed to you privately. Last year, when we began the conversations about 1,000 Black Men Initiative, and then COVID hit and put things on hold. And as we're beginning to open it up now, as the weather warms up, we're all going in the same direction. No need to reinvent the wheel. I submit to your leadership and commit everything that we've talked about and done to your initiative. I want to encourage you to keep being a gadfly and keep agitating and keep speaking up. And there are far more with you than not. So I just want to say that to you and thank you for your advocacy and for your assuming the mantle in this critical conversation that goes right to the survival of our people. I want to sound a deep note of gratitude to you, Mayor Schul, and to Mayor Pro Tem Johnson and to Councilor Caballero for this work on vaccine equity. There's a saying that goes that I'm paraphrasing, that when America catches a cold, Black folk catch pneumonia. Wherever the country is, whatever issues that Black and brown communities are facing are always exacerbated. The numbers of vaccine disparity coupled with this talk of reopening scares me, because what we're talking about is getting back to business as usual, despite the vaccine disparity between Black and brown folk and the majority community. I know this isn't by design, but the message oftentimes is like, as long as white folk are okay, we can start to open back up again. Things are going all right. So we're talking about June 1st opening up, and these numbers still are what they are. So I want folk to be very clear that as we get back to normal, part of that normalcy is having these disparities just baked into business as usual in our country. So I just want to thank you all so much for the work you're doing in bolstering those numbers and making sure that that marginalized communities are to the best of our ability getting vaccinated, because we've seen this movie before. When certain folk get vaccinated and when certain folk are all right, it's okay to return to business as usual, knowing that others are still lagging behind. And the hope was that during this period of lockdown, during this period of when we've all kind of pulled back, that maybe we could have made up some ground and done some work to fix some things. But it's clear to me that our country, our city, our state's going to go back to normal, and things for many of us will still be the same. And as folk are moving around and becoming maskless and going about their business, the folk who are not vaccinated are going to be most at risk for still getting sick. So I just want to name that, and I just want to put that in the space. So the work you're doing is so critically important, and I just want to thank each of you, and you know, whatever we can do in support of that in any way, please let us know. I look forward to the proposal on workers coming back, public health workers coming back to us. I'm vaccinated. You know, everybody on this council is a privileged person. We all got our stuff going on, but we're privileged. I'm vaccinated. You know, I'm gonna be all right. But as we get back to normal, and we're gonna be all right. It's just, you know, I'm glad on the one hand that we're coming out of it, but you know, here we go again with the folk who were behind still being behind. So thank you for the work. Tuesday was a pretty special day for me, and I want to thank the mayor for acknowledging my birthday. But it was special for me because we got a verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial. And today I just want to send out solidarity and best wishes to members of the George Floyd family. There's a significant contingent of his family here in North Carolina that I've had opportunity to be in space in different contexts. So I just want to not congratulations, but our blessings and our strength and our solidarity to you. We know that nothing we can do obviously can bring Brother Floyd back, but whatever semblance of rest, whatever semblance of closure, whatever it does, I hope that you can take some measure of consolation in this, as personally as a family. And then there's the larger issue, of course, for us as a country, for us as a people moving forward. So I just want to not celebrate but just hold space and reflect on, you know, it shouldn't take all this to get to something that was so obvious to all of us. But nonetheless, here we are. And I do want to just send wishes, best wishes and solidarity out to that family and to all of the freedom fighters and to all of the activists who pressed us and who brought the country to critical mass for us to turn our faces to situations like this and do the work that is necessary. So finally, it was a good day today. Later that night, I showed up to one of my other two jobs other than this one and expecting to just get to work, and a party broke out. Charlie, with all due respect, at 65, not 60, get it right. And I didn't even know I was invited, buddy, but we can still do something. We can still set something up. So I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for showing up. I've been to a lot of Bible studies too, and by far, that was the best one I've been to. You know, anytime Stevie Wonder and Earth, Wind, and Fire are part of Bible study, it's going to be a good night. So thank you all so much, and thank you all from around the city for the well wishes and greetings you've sent. God bless our city. Let's keep getting to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Are there any further announcements? All right then, Council Member Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to echo Councilmember Middleton's response and just noting for Councilmember Freelon, I did just shoot you an email, but I would like to have more conversation about how to support the women in that conversation. Those young men have mothers, sisters, aunts, and I think I've been engaging them through my work in the community.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll now move to priority items, and I'll first ask if we have any priority items by the city manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the Durham City Council. I do have some priority items for you this afternoon. Agenda item number 8, proposed water and sewer rates for fiscal year 2021-2022. We have a presentation that should last approximately 40 minutes, including the questions. Agenda item number 11, residential backflow prevention assembly testing and repair, award of service contract to Acme Services of Durham Incorporated. Attachment number 1 was updated. Agenda item number 17, amendment to contract with Powerhouse Recycling, Inc. for recycling services for electronic equipment. Attachment number 3 was added. Agenda item number 20, consolidated annexation, Olive Branch Reserve. Attachments number 10 and number 12 were updated. And finally, agenda item number 23, a closed session is requested to discuss an economic development matter. And that supplemental item has been added to your agenda for the closed session. That is all I have this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Madam Manager. Colleagues, you have heard the manager's priority items. Can I have a motion for their acceptance?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Reese, seconded by Councilmember Caballero. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon.
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and thank you, Madam Manager. The motion passes unanimously. Madam Attorney, any priority items for us this afternoon?
Sorry to
Mr.
disappoint
Attorney.
you, Mayor.
Good to see you.
I think y'all know Kim sent a message. She's actually moderating a panel discussion at the International Municipal Attorneys Conference this afternoon, and you may be interested to know the panel discussion is on local government response to the pandemic, which I would say that the city of Durham has been a model of. So Kim is actually moderating that panel discussion right now. Good to see you all. And the city attorney's office has no priority items.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. All right, colleagues, now we'll hear from our city clerk. Madam Clerk, any priority items?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. The city clerk's office has no priority items.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. All right, colleagues, we'll now move to the administrative consent agenda. Item 1, the city clerk's office approval of city council minutes. Just want to say, Madam Clerk, great job keeping them up to date. We've had a lot of special meetings and budget meetings, and they're really good. Item 2, Mayor's Hispanic Latino Committee appointment. Under departmental items, Budget and Management Services Department, item 3, Green and Equitable Infrastructure Project. And I'll pull this item for discussion. Item 4, City County Planning Department, City County Planning Department FY22 work program. Under Community Development Department, item 5, approval of the draft FY 2021-22 annual action plan. Under item 6, conveyance of 702, 704, and 917 Grant Street to Durham Community Land Trustees for the purpose of affordable housing development. We have a couple of people here that would like to speak on that item, so I'm going to pull item 6. And you all will note that we received much public comment, written public comment in support of this item. Department of Transportation, item 7, Capital Improvement Project CIP Ordinance Amendment and contract for signal timing services for the Durham computerized signal system. I just want to say I wasn't aware of this modernization plan, and it's great to see, mostly federally funded, my kind of project, but it's great. Item 8, proposed water and sewer rates for FY 21-22, and this is a presentation. Item 9, construction manager at risk guaranteed maximum price for Miss Lake Dam reconstruction amendment number 6 for Gilbane Building Company. Item 10, Miss Lake facility expansion amendment number 1 to construction material testing and contract with Falcon Engineering Incorporated. Item 11, residential backflow prevention assembly testing and repair, award of service contract to Acme Services of Durham Incorporated. And I'm going to pull this item. Item 12, residential backflow prevention assembly testing and repair, award of service contract of Waterworks Services Incorporated. Finance Department, item 13, resolution authorizing the virtual city auction. Item 14, under Fleet Department, cooperative group purchase contract, 3 international trucks. Under Public Works Department, item 15, contract ST318C, inspections for construction projects. There are people who are listed to attendees who are interested in this item, but I understand they're only here in case there are questions to be asked. Item 16.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, if we're not going to pull that, let me just say real quick, I'm really excited about these projects, especially the trail repair items. Much needed and much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, council member. Item 16, utility extension agreement with Charter Development Company LLC to serve National Heritage Academy's Oak Grove Charter School. And I'm going to ask, I'm going to come back to that one in a minute. I have a question for administration and maybe the attorney about item 16. Solid Waste Management Department, item 17, amendment to contract with Powerhouse Recycling, Inc. for recycling services for electronic equipment. I had sent a request to the administration about letting us know how much has been recycled, and I believe there might be an attachment. Was that one of the attachments that was added, Madam Manager, is in regard to that information from your priority items, item 17?
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Wallace.
You bet.
Item under presentations, budget and management services department, item 18, PolicyLink fines and fees justice program, parking pilots and reforms. Item 19, under the city council's office, proposal to create a poet laureate position at the city of Durham. And then under public hearing, city county planning department, item 20, consolidated annexation Olive Branch Reserve. Item 21, Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, Omnibus Changes 16, TC 21000001. Item 22, Zoning Map Change, Casa North Duke, Z200039. And item 23, a closed session to discuss an economic development matter. Madam Manager, let me ask you, and perhaps the attorney as well, I'm not sure who is most appropriate here before we go through the items. Item 16, the utility extension agreement with Charter Development Company to serve National Heritage Academies. This item, the staff recommended that we not go forward with this action. And so was wondering how we ought to handle this today, and thought that either you or Mr. O'Toole might be able to advise us of the best course of action.
Mayor, this is Don O'Toole. I had previously communicated with the manager's office about this item. I guess my suggestion is that it not be placed on the consent agenda for your Monday night meeting, but that it be put under general business so that it be considered and voted on. Because I think, as council knows, all motions are stated in the affirmative. So if council is to elect to follow staff's recommendation, they actually would deny this motion.
All right. Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. I think that's very helpful. So colleagues, of course, if no one pulled this today, but we will put it on GBA for the following Monday. Thank you for that advice. That's what I needed to know. So, Madam Manager, the items that I have pulled items are 3, 6, and 11, and presentations are 8, 18, and 19.
The mayor, I thought I heard 4, but evidently not. That was
okay. Let me check that.
It may not have been.
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Manager. All right, colleagues, we'll now move to the pulled items. The first item is item 3. This is the Green and Equitable Infrastructure Project. And to continue our discussion of this, I know that the manager in our one-on-ones has been talking to us about what the administration is thinking. But I wanted to know, I think it would be useful, Madam Manager, or for whoever you might designate, to let us know your thinking at this point about potential room in the budget for some advance on the green and equitable infrastructure, and any thoughts that you might have. And then colleagues, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will begin by saying we are still in the process of reviewing our budget. As you all know, we did have, several new initiatives proposed by our departments, as well as some potential cuts. And we want to make sure that as we review these items, we use, our operating knowledge and experience, as well as an equity lens. So we are still kind of in that process. And so the information I provide today will be preliminary, but we have been talking as an administration around being able to potentially, if the council decides today to increase our capital investment through a tax increase, that we could potentially include that increase within the guidelines that have already been provided, as long as it was one of the lower amounts. So you have been provided some additional information from finance as to what 1/4 cent or 1/2 cent may be able to deliver. Obviously, with the 1.38 cents for housing, we would not be able to get the 1 cent on top of that, in the 2 cent guideline. But some portion of that, we could absorb in that guideline. So I just wanted to provide that here in public for your consideration.
Thank you, Madam Manager. That's just what I think we needed to hear to get a kind of basic understanding. And if I can restate it just to make sure I am clear, we set out a 2 cent guideline, a maximum of 2 cent tax increase. Of course, we could change that. That's at our discretion, but that was the guideline that we laid out. 1.38 cents of that would be for the affordable housing bonds, and that leaves 0.62 cents that is still available inside that cap. And as I heard the manager, it sounds like there is room within that for us to potentially, if we were to choose, either a 1/2 cent or a 1/4 cent. I guess there's also some numbers in between those that we could use of those funds for increasing our capital debt, and that would produce in the chart on the attachment, the chart that we saw last time for this item 3, you will see that for example, a 1/2 cent could produce $6 million a year in additional green and equitable infrastructure, essentially forever. On this is a 10-year chart, but it would go beyond that. Or it could produce 18 million in the first year, and then 3 years of not producing anything if you did 18 million in the first year, and then 10 million for the following 4 years. And I would assume it would sort of drop off after that back into the 6 million range. We wanted to know about further out what it would look like. We could get Mr. Boyd to tell us. And a 1/4 cent you'll also see on the chart. And of course, that produces less, but still a significant amount. We do have to make the decision. If we were to go to a bond issue, I think now is the time when we really need to make that decision. And so I'm looking forward to any thoughts that you all might have. Happy to hear any thoughts and ideas. And I know our administration is looking for some guidance. Let me just say one other thing. I don't think, and I'll defer to the administration. I don't think that we have to absolutely make it. For example, if we were just if the administration were to, I think we could say, a 1/4 cent or a 1/2 cent today. I don't think we need to absolutely put the nail in what it is. So I'll ask the manager, do you need an absolute number today, or do you need more of a kind of a range, or what do you need?
So really what we would need today is, as you will recall, there was a schedule that we would have to keep if the council was going to go forward with the bond referendum this fall. So that would be number one for us. that decision, taking place today, if possible, realizing this is not, is not an action meeting, but giving us the guidance. And if that were the case, then and you did still want to have some additional investment in our CIP, we would then want to have, some more time, a little bit more time on, how much that would be. So you wouldn't have to be specific to say, 1/4 today or 1/2 today, but we would have more working room, and we would know we would not be looking at doing a bond for any portion of this investment.
Thank you, Madam Manager. That's what I thought, and I appreciate that confirmation. Thank you. All right, colleagues, I would love to hear your thoughts now about where you think we might want to land on this, and happy to hear any ideas or thoughts. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I just want to ask the question, acknowledging that 50 million, the bond that we were talking about for 50 million would not be enough. I was wondering if we were talking about doing them in tandem, or is this like holding off on the bond and doing this first? Because I'm acknowledging that there are probably some infrastructure items like hard buildings and the things that are covered by bonds that will need to be covered. And then there's also the kind of like salaried, positions that would also need to be added. And so there are some needs that will need to come out of the budget as well. And so I know one of the things that the DOS community keeps asking for is for staff, acknowledging that they don't have projects coming forward in this conversation because they haven't had staff whose focus is to come up with projects. And so it's all on volunteers in our community. I'm very supportive of moving forward this year, next year, but I think it's important that we do something, acknowledging that. I remember when you talked about the Beltline Trail and how you said you started in like the 80s or something, and it's been that long and we're not moving. So just acknowledging how, we need to address our climate change. We need to address all of these things, and we talk about it, but this is an opportunity to actually do something about it. And I'm excited to move forward.
Thank you, Council Member. I'll respond to just one part of one question that you asked, just as I see it, but this is just the way I see it. This is a collective decision. I think that, I think about this a lot like I think about how we did with affordable housing, where we began with the tax expenditure, and which we've kept. And then on top of that, we came in with the bond at a later time. So my thought is, if we came in with a tax expenditure this year without the bond, that we would certainly have the option, and that would be our collective decision, to do the bond next year. And so I agree that the needs are very large, and so that's my thought. Other Councilmember Caballero, and then Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to say that I agree. I do not think we are ready to put a bond on the ballot in the fall, especially based on the kind of outreach and consensus building we did on the affordable housing bond. I think the timeline is too tight. I also believe that we need to put extra funding. So I'm interested in hearing from, where I'm at is the conversation between a quarter cent and a half cent. I think what you just said, Mr. Mayor, about how we approached affordable housing it's a good template. It's been successful. And so I think that could be applied. I also do want to acknowledge the conversation that happened that Councilmember Freeman lifted up and DOST, which is, as we're thinking about projects, while there's many trails indicated, there isn't a lot of conversation around open space. And it's a conversation, there was an email sent to all council members this morning. So that is another reason why I'm not comfortable moving forward with the bond, is I do think there's conversations that have to happen around infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I'm using that broadly. Improvements, basically projects that improve the quality of life for residents. And not putting it on for this fall really gives us that opportunity to have these important community conversations.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to say I've been thinking kind of along the same lines as your proposal that we put something in the budget just with the tax rate this year and then look to a bond in the next year or two. A half cent would take us very slightly over our 2-cent goal, but I would be comfortable with moving forward with a half cent increase into the CIP budget for these projects. Thanks.
I think the half cent would bring us to 1.88.
Oh, okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's even better.
All right. Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, colleagues. So some time ago, I went on record saying that I think we should take an escalatory approach, that we should start with bulking up the CIP through the tax rate and then introducing the bond. I am even more convinced after the conversation we had, the public hearing we had on CDBG funds. It's clear to me that there's a lot of talking we need to do with stakeholders in the community, particularly residents in some of our Black legacy communities around the city. I'm informed by the lessons we learned, or I think at least we should have learned, the affordable housing bond rollout and the lift that was. I think Council Caballero hit it on the head. I agree with. I don't think the time that it would take to do the proper groundwork belongs to us at this time. So, I think an escalatory approach, doing the tax increase and then the bond, I think would be the best approach. I'm supportive of the half cent, but whatever the will of the council is, I'll certainly, obviously, yield to that. I do want to say, however, I'll offer this caveat. If we do the tax increase for capital projects, I want to commit that we're not doing it just to buttress the trajectory we're already on, that we've got to have a serious equity lens conversation and a serious conversation about reprioritizing some things that are on CIP. I'm not interested in just giving more money to what we're doing. So I support the increase in tax tethered to a serious lightning strike on some of the projects that we've been hearing about from Bragtown, some of the projects we've been hearing about from Merrick Moore communities, some of the projects we've been hearing about from East Durham and other communities. If we're not going to do that, then I don't want to raise taxes for CIP. There's other things we could buttress. But if we're going to do it, I want to make sure that we're committed to doing it. Well, we're calling it green, equitable infrastructure, that where the equity part is actually emphasized in that. And that's gonna call for some serious, tough conversations, I think, on some of the things that are in our CIP and the ranking of them. So with that said, I support escalation, starting with tax increase and then the bond, with the provision that we're leaning in on equity. Thank you all.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really grateful to hear my colleagues talk about this. And I'm in the unsettling and all too frequent position of not being able to add very much to what my colleague, Councilmember Middleton, said. I just think what he said was exactly right. If we're going to raise taxes on folks to put more into the CIP, it needs to be in service to making the investments that we know we need to make in communities that have been disinvested in for generations. And I don't think it's got to stop with the half cent or wherever we end up. By the way, I'm fine with that. I think, as Councilmember Middleton has said previously, we need to take a look at the whole CIP and figure out what we're doing. And I think that's something that this group of elected officials is well up to that task. So that's where I am with it. I'm not going to take much more time repeating myself. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Freelon.
Yes, I want to echo the sentiments of everyone who's spoken. I'm cool with the half cent and leading with the tax increase, and then coming next year or the following with the bond. But I had a question for maybe the city attorney about this. It's kind of a side issue now, since it seems like we have a consensus to do what I've just described. But I'm curious what the latest is on the election this fall, and if there's going to be one at all, or if there's any update from the General Assembly or, you know, from our attorney's office on where things stand with regard to the potential for an election this fall or next year at some point. Oh, you're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you, council member. I'm not sure our attorney will have any expertise on that, but I wonder, is there anyone that feels like either Mr. O'Toole, Ms. Wallace, or anyone else that has any updated information? Ms. Wallace, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, members of the City Council. I'm Carmisha Wallace from the City Manager's Office. And I will share with you that the General Assembly has not taken action regarding the elections. Of course, my understanding is that 42 cities in North Carolina will be impacted by the potential legislation, but no action has been taken on at this time. So at this point, from what I've been told, Durham would not be impacted anyway because we don't vote by districts. But for the other cities in North Carolina, they certainly will be impacted. But at this point, that has not become state law just yet, but something that I continue to monitor.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Ms. Wallace. I'll also just add that I have heard from our senators what Ms. Wallace said, that they don't think Durham would be impacted, and that we're going to almost certainly have a November election. But that's not set in stone, but that's just what they have discussed it some with the Republican leadership, and that's what they've heard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, I think we have an emerging consensus, which I'm going to try to state and then just ask if there are any other comments. I believe that our emerging consensus, Madam Manager, for you is that we're not as a group prepared to go ahead at this point with a bond issue, although we continue to be interested in that for next year. But that we would like to support a 1/2 cent tax increase for green and equitable infrastructure in this budget, with a special emphasis on the equitable, that we believe that we need to do serious work in tackling our CIP to make sure that we are putting at the top of the list those projects that further equity in our community. And so I think did I fairly state the consensus? I just want to make sure everybody's good. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. Is there a way to possibly get some type of estimate around what some of the projects might cost if we were to move forward with like Merrick Moore or Fayetteville Street or East Durham? I think that Councilmember Middleton made the great point of noting that if we reorganize, the numbers that we received were based on projects that don't include any of those. And I think that the 18 million max might not encompass enough to even have impact on 2 of those areas. And so picking between them and noting that 18 million is over that time frame, I just want to make sure we have some numbers, because rather than doing the 1 cent versus that 1/2 cent could make a huge difference. It's acknowledging we're pushing off the bond another year.
Madam Manager, do you want to comment on that?
I can make a general comment, and I have certainly been listening as the council, as you all have been having this discussion. And one of the things that we want to do as an organization, administratively, is to really look at the items in our CIP as they currently stand. As we well know that it is our long-term plan for investment. Some of those projects that are there, are projects that you all have approved in the past, but they may not have been funded. Some of them have been approved, based on plans that are getting pretty dated. Obviously there are times when we have, the ones that are close up already emotional. There could have been, some some planning or, you know, design around them. And those would be ones that were, you know, more active, but multi-year. But what I do hear you saying is that, you know, we look at our CIP, we look at it every year, and we're going to put new money in it. And that money, you all have, you know, already done a prioritization for how you'd like to spend that money, and tied it, you know, to green and equitable infrastructure. So we know that, we hear that, but we also have a pretty big CIP in total. And we want to make sure that we're looking at that in every line item, and we're looking at it with an equity lens, and, you know, making modifications that are you know, are reasonable and responsible as we go along, and primarily giving you the information that you need so that you can make those decisions, you know, because you have the you know, you have the final approval for that. So I can probably try to respond a little better, but that is what I would say at this time.
Thank you, Madam Manager. I think we have a consensus. And Madam Manager, do you feel like you have the direction that you need?
I do.
Thank you. And of course, if things come up in the budget that provide additional demands, you will let us know. We can, of course, modify our decision or our guidelines. And I know you'll let us know what the needs are.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, colleagues, thank you so much for that. I think that's a really good direction. I do want to say to those folks who are liaisons, council members, who are liaisons to some of our groups, that EAB, DOST, BPAC, and others, that it will be good. We're giving ourselves time now, as Councilmember Caballero and Councilmember Middleton have both said, to have some other discussion. And we need to figure out how to have that discussion to build up to a bond. I really agree with what you all said about the need to do that. And some of it will be through our established boards and commissions. So I think we need some really good listening there. And also we need to figure out what kind of other outreach we're going to be doing prior to next year's budget season and during next year's budget season, as we build up to a decision about whether or not to put a bond on the ballot. And I just think as a group, we need to think a little bit about a structure in order to do that. So nothing today, but if you all would just, I think we should all put on our thinking caps and figure out how to do that. You remember for the affordable housing bond, we put together an advisory committee that met for several months prior to our decision to put the bond on the ballot. And I'm wondering if that might also be a beneficial way to move around this. We could get people representative, as we did with the housing bond. We had a broad representation, and we could do the same. It was about a 15-member group, and it was informal. I appointed them, but we could do it in a lot of different ways. But I hope you'll just please think about that and let me know, and be talking amongst ourselves about how we want to proceed on that. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would just want to add to that the conversation around staffing, acknowledging that, you know, a lot more can happen when there's specific folks focused on it. And so I'm not just thinking about the open space position, but also an equity and inclusion position, so that someone is focused on making sure that the projects that come forward have equity and inclusion at the forefront. And also noting that I think right now we have a one-person shop around diversity and equity, and it's not feasible to do a CIP reboot with one person. And so just acknowledging that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other comments? Thank you all. Let's, Councilmember Caballero, sorry.
Yeah, would you all feel comfortable? I am the liaison or the alternate to many of the boards and commissions. I know Councilmember Freeman is also on either the liaison or the alternate. Would you all feel comfortable with these initial conversations around an advisory board, like to start picking brains in those spaces? because we can get those on the agenda in May even.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, those boards have tried themselves to improve their diversity and their equity emphasis. So I think that will need to be part of the discussion, but I think those are great spaces to begin the conversation.
Thank you.
I would note that I think the EAB has done a really good job with it. And I think adding the environmental justice aspect in as an actual slot made that huge shift. And I don't know if the same thing has occurred for BPAC or for DOST, but yes, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Great idea. All right. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now move on to item 6. Item 6 was an item that I pulled for because there are a couple of people here who I see would like to speak on that item. This is the conveyance of the property on Grant Street to the Community Land Trust. And I see that Mr. Woolley and Ms. Mays are here. And I see Selena Mack is here as well. Ms. Mack, let me ask first, are you planning to speak on this item or are you just here to listen? If you're here, could you put in the chat whether or not you'd like to speak? Or maybe you can speak up. Go ahead. Would you like to speak, Ms. Mack? I think you're able to be heard now if you want to unmute yourself.
How's that?
Good.
That's better.
Yes.
I was here to listen. I wasn't sure if there were going to be questions on the item, so I signed up to speak, but I did want to just express my appreciation for the conveyance of this property, DCLT, and to the affordable housing, in this community, which hasn't seen, affordable housing in this neighborhood for quite some time. So I do want to just, again, express my appreciation. I know there are other people signed up to speak who represent the community. We were invited by the community to develop here, and we're looking forward to finally moving this project forward.
Thank you, Ms. Mack. We appreciate your work and your leadership. Ajax Woolley is also here. Madam Clerk, could you make Ajax Woolley, please, available to be heard? Okay, Mr. Woolley, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mayor Sewell, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, and City Manager Page, and staff, and neighbors, and Selena, hi. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak briefly on this item. I'd refer you to the final paragraph in the background on the memo where it says DCLT's plan has support from neighborhood leaders who were instrumental in initially identifying the affordable housing potential of city-owned lots on Grant Street. And it has been my greatest good fortune in my volunteer organizing experience with Durham Can to work alongside those Grant Street leaders on the 700 block. If you haven't met them, I hope you will soon. Words fall short to describe my esteem for them. They are the embodiment of beloved community. The living memory of neighbors such as Ms. Brenda, Ms. Joanne, Ms. Diane, and other family on the block encompasses a depth of wisdom and a rootedness in the heart and soul of Durham that we should stop and listen to whenever we're offered the chance. It is a joyful and somber privilege to sit with them at Ms. Brenda's front porch and hear about the life of Hayti today and yesteryear. That porch is a seat of peaceful power. To my left, I can see Monument of Faith on Simmons Street. To my right, I can see the site of the former Fayetteville Street projects. And straight ahead is the expertly guided campus of Student U at the site of W.G. Pearson School. There are so many wise leaders in that neighborhood: Bishop Clarence Laney, the co-chair of the Durham Can Clergy Caucus and a guiding partner in this initiative, Elder James Blake at Fisher Memorial, Pastor William Lucas at First Chronicles. They've all supported this work for Grant Street along the way. And their journey to help create this initiative for the donation of these small vacant lots to DCLT is a direct expression of their love for the neighborhood and the city. And DCLT leadership, super happy Selena's here. They've been sensitive and responsive throughout this process. And we especially appreciate their, their ability to listen. I also want to recognize Sherry Taylor in that regard, and we're looking forward to the collaboration with Durham Building Company as their partners. And finally, thanks to the support of staff and community development. I am sure this was not a simple arrangement to make happen, but they've arrived at it through perseverance, and we look forward to working with all of the parties and to broaden and deepen our listening continuously among our neighbors in the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woolley. Much appreciated. Regina Mays, is Ms. Mays available to be heard, Madam Clerk? Ms. Mays, welcome. You also have 3 minutes. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and all City Council members. I'm speaking on behalf of Durham Can as a member of Monument of Faith in regards to the historical Hayti community. In the past 8 years, I have seen the community make huge shifts, some good and some not so good. As a previous resident on Simmons Street and a previous employee with workspaces in that area, I have seen developers come through and purchase family inherited land for pennies and rehab and sell for rent or rents for amounts that are not affordable to present residents. I have also witnessed and was directly affected by the closing of the previous Boys and Girls Club, where my teens attended and were asked to be transported out of the neighborhood to Lion Park to attend positive activities for teens. Most of the youth at that time decided not to engage due to not having access to activities in our own neighborhood. I support DCLT to enhance the neighborhood and not to disband the neighborhood as we have seen from other developments that have came through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mays. We appreciate your being with us today. All right, colleagues, you've heard the comments today, and this will, of course, go on our consent agenda, and look forward to taking up this item on Monday night. All right, our next item is item 11, residential backflow prevention, assembly, testing, and repair, and I pulled this item. And I see Mr. Greeley. Mr. Greeley, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Don Greeley, Department of Water Management.
Mr. Greeley, why do we have this program? I see that there are 4,000 potential customers, 375 of whom take advantage of this program. I don't understand exactly kind of what's the incentive for us to do this as opposed to having them do it privately.
Summarizes, the program started around 2013. At that time, there were a number of residents who had backflow preventers that had issues with the department as we tried to enforce the annual testing of those backflow preventers. We're required by the state to have those tested and for them to become out of compliance. There was discussion with the city manager's office about what ways we can offer to our residents to help them be able to get their backflow preventers tested on it, because they have to be on an annual basis, and we don't want them to go out of compliance. If they get out of compliance, eventually we have to terminate their water service, which we would prefer not to do. So we created this program that would, once you opt in, that instead of the homeowner having to contact various plumbers to try to get somebody to come out, that they could, via this program, the city would manage it and just have those backflows just tested and then billed to the customer.
And so does that mean that the advantage to us then, what is the advantage to us? Or to our customers?
Number one, it saves them the time that they don't have to reach out to several different plumbers to come out. They may, and a plumber they might have not have used the year before may not be available, so they have to find somebody new. They have to meet with them, negotiate a price. So it's convenient for them. The benefits the city by making sure we have compliance, that those backflow preventers are tested, The contract also includes some minor repairs if the tester finds that there needed some, so it ensures compliance.
And it's an opt-in.
Yes. And they can opt out if they choose to as well.
Do we want the other several thousand people to be members of this program as well, or what's our objective?
Yeah, it's dropped down over the last several years. When we first started the program, it got up to about, I think, 800, 850, somewhere in that neighborhood. But don't quote me, it's somewhere around that area, but we can get those numbers if you want. And it's kind of slowly reduced since the first offering, but it's up to them. We've had really high compliance with our annual testing, and kudos to our cross-country control staff because they do a great job of outreach to whoever the homeowner is or the business owner is to make them aware that the testing is, we go through several steps to avoid termination of service. So they do a great job. I think we're in the high 90s for compliance. So.
Does that include just those 375 people, or does that include all the customers that
includes, that's the whole program.
Good. Well, that's a lot. That's very high compliance.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, that gives me a lot of comfort. What I couldn't quite figure out is if this was something that we really wanted everyone to be on because we weren't getting compliance, but it sounds like that's not the case.
No, it's more of a convenience for the customer. It also helps us for those customers that might have struggled with managing this. It's an easier way for them. So it's more of a customer service offering that they can choose to do it themselves or go through this program.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Greeley. Definitely don't need any more numbers. Those are plenty. And thank you very much. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Greeley. Always great to see you. Is it also the case that in homes where there's not a backflow preventer installed and some problem occurs that would have been solved with a backflow preventer, is it often the case that the homeowner will decide that it was probably the city's fault that this catastrophe happened in their home because of something outside of their home?
Not really, because the backflow preventer is usually associated with irrigation when it comes to residential yards. So we have not seen that.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Freeman.
I'm just a question. With the backflow preventer test or the test that's taken, is that the smoke?
No, this is for it prevents backflow into the water distribution system.
Okay.
What you're thinking of the smoke testing with the sewer collection system.
Okay. And then this is where they're like running all the water out in the backflow, like with those big.
Councilmember, we just lost you for a minute there.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, is this the water flow where the cones are on the fire hydrants?
No, this is an actual backflow preventer device you might see in the front yards of some houses that have kind of like the fake rock. That's kind of, why is that rock in the middle of the yard? Well, that's kind of covering up backflow assembly that's not buried underground or at least below ground level. That's to prevent, mostly if you have an irrigation system, there's the potential for contaminants to, under the fluctuation with pressure in our system, to pull water back in from the house. And if that's, with an irrigation system with potential pesticides and fertilizer, and that could get into the irrigation system, and should there be a pressure loss or a water main break, that actually might pull that water, contaminated water, into the system. And that's what the backflow preventer prevents. It doesn't allow that water to flow back into the distribution system.
Thank you, Mr. Greenlee, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for making sure I understood, because I didn't catch that piece. I was thinking it was something different. So,
yeah. Thank you. No problem.
I didn't understand all that either, and I appreciate it very much.
Yep.
Mr. Greenlee, thank you.
Certainly.
All right, colleagues, we have 3 more items, presentations, before we go into closed session. And the first one is item 8, which is the water and sewer rates. And I believe Mr. Greeley will be back with us here for this item from wherever he is in Lake Mickey. I believe he's presenting to us from Lake Mickey.
Tier Quarry today.
Tier Quarry. Okay, great.
Don Greeley, Water Management. I would ask the city clerk to bring up the presentation. Great, thank you. And once again, good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Don Greeley, Water Management. Happy today to present the proposed water and sewer rates for fiscal year 2022. Before we get started, I would like to thank my assistant directors, Vicki Westbrook and John Young, as well as Heidi Hackett, the utility finance manager, and her team of Kathy Compton and Lori Scheiss, David Boyd in finance as well, and Raf Tellis, who's our financial rate modeler, and Bart Krebs with his team. So I'd like to thank all of them because it takes all of us to be able to work together to be able to bring this to you every year. And they do a great job. And I just wanted to thank them up front before next slide, please. So just very quickly, the rates, of course, cover all the utility operations, both water reservoirs and pumping stations, both water treatment plants, both water reclamation facilities, maintenance, rehab and replacement of 1,400 miles of water lines, 1,100 miles of sewer lines, our storage tanks, our lift stations. This utility now serves over 300,000 people, and we're creeping up on 100,000 accounts that we manage for the utility. Next slide, please. General outline, very similar to what we've seen in past years. Talk a little bit about, once again, to go over our objectives, strategies, and key issues about rate setting every year. Talk briefly about the capital improvement program, go over our customer consumption, and then actually talk about proposed rates for next year. So next slide, please. We have 3 tenets when it comes to our rate setting, and these have been consistent over the years. First and foremost, we want to make sure our rates are affordable. We want to make sure that they're fair and there's equity within when we set our rates, which is why we have tiered rates. Of course, we want to have the rates to allow the utility to be sustainable. All the rates, of course, pay for all of the utility operations, maintenance, financing, and also there's a contribution back to the general fund for the general fund support of the water and sewer fund. And we want to promote water efficiency and conservation. Next slide, please. Really want to focus on affordability to start with. Of course, we have tiered rates. This allows us to have the customers kind of are empowered to manage their costs by looking at how much they consume water. They have a choice of how much water they can use and what tier they can be in to a certain extent. We want to make sure from our 10-year financial model that we use every year that we want to try to minimize the impacts to customers, especially in the lower tiers. And we want to be able to implement programs to assist our low and fixed income customers across the utility. So next slide, please. As you can see, looking back 5 years and looking forward 5 years, you can see tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. That represents close to 86% of our customers are in those bottom 3 tiers. And so it's important to make sure with our financial planning with the rates to keep those as flat as possible. And I think the chart speaks for itself that we've been able to do that both in the past and going forward. So having small incremental rates annually allows us to flatten this out and smooth the rates out so we don't have rate shock. So I didn't know if there's any questions on this chart. Otherwise, we'll keep going. All right, next slide, please. Of course, part of our programs that we have for affordability is for payment arrangements. If a customer gets into a situation where they have difficulty paying their bill, we're more than happy to accommodate them and work out a payment plan to be able to pay those water and sewer bills over time. There's a lot of flexibility, even more so with COVID, as far as setting up when there are dates and how long that period is extended. So we've extended payments out, a lot with COVID, all the way up to 12 months to be able to work stuff out with work out our accounts with our customers. So, and that's worked out really well, increasing the flexibility with our customers. Next slide, please. Something that's really helped, of course, with the hardship fund is, customers are able to qualify up to $240 annually to help pay off their outstanding bills. One of the things that we've changed, usually it was a one-time assistance. We've changed that now so we can break up that $240 so it can be used monthly. If you look at the current typical tier one bill of $23.39, if you're getting $20 a month out of the hardship fund, that means you're only paying $3.39 a month for the water bill, which we hope was able to assist our customers. We initially, of course, had $150,000 dedicated to this program out of the general fund annually. That was increased to by $200,000. So the whole program is currently at $350,000. This helped minimize, of course, the number of cutoffs and how quickly people can, if they were cut off, how quickly they can get reconnected. What we really saw with the use of the hardship fund, and as well as a lot of the effort with staff, and then of course the community organizations that were willing to come to us to help our customers, and our partnership with Access H2O, that we've really been able to help customers clean their slate of any back billing that they have, and to really start fresh. And we've seen very much a high rate of success with customers now that we've cleaned up issues and concerns around their water bill, that they've been able to move forward and stay on time with their monthly billing. So we've been really excited. Partnership with Access HCO has been wonderful, because they not only do they provide assistance, but they also work with the homeowner and or a tenant about issues that they may have in their house that may be causing them to use more water than they should if they have a leak, or some kind of fixture that's not working for them properly, that they assist the homeowner and the renter to with those programs. So that's been a great partnership, and we really appreciate their help with that. Next slide, please. So far, as of the end of March, we've spent over $307,000 with the hardship fund, and are expected to use another $27,000 before the end of the year. So the $350,000 combined with the other partnerships seems to have been able to handle the needs of our customers. So, and we'd really like, hopefully we'd like to see that funding in place for next year, if that's possible. But I know there's a lot of demands with the budget. Next slide, please. Overall, our multi-year rate strategy, as I said, we use a 10-year rate model. Our goal, of course, is to have small annual rate increases to keep those tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 that you saw in that chart really flat as much as possible. We want to smooth out rates so there's no rate shock. We want to cover any increased costs with operating. We have a large capital program, and of course, any new regulatory requirements that come down through EPA or the state. Of course, now in our 10-year window is building the facilities to access our Jordan Lake allocation to meet the future demand of the city. And by bringing the Jordan Lake, our allocation online, that will help us meet our demand up through 2060 for our water demand. So we're currently working with our Western intake partners, Chatham County, Pittsboro, and Owasso, to work together to bring all of those facilities online. So we're taking the initial requests for proposals and are negotiating scope of works with several different engineering companies to start some of that preliminary work. And of course, we're large part thanks to David Boyd and his team, looking at structure, all the future borrowing to make sure that we're smoothing out the impacts to the rates for our customers. And we're continuing to manage our debt to the benefit of our ratepayers, not necessarily at high bond ratings. So next slide, please. So of course, to put together a large part of the expenses and consideration for the rate model is our capital improvement program. Next slide, please. We're looking at over the next 5 years for appropriations, $585 million worth of appropriations. Over the next 10 years, we anticipate having to actual money to be spent between 1.1 and 1.3 billion dollars. That's broken out into roughly 4 pieces, each about roughly 25%. So 25% of that 1.1, 1.3 billion dollars will go towards renewal replacement of our distribution system. Another 25% will go to renewal replacement of our sewer collection system. Another 25% will be towards renewal replacement and expansion at our water and wastewater facilities, as well as a lot of work that's now needed at both of our dams. And then the last 25%, it will be needed to bring the Jordan Lake project online. So very high dollars. It's a large program, but by using a 10-year financial plan, really helps us keep those rates small and smooth. And that's, because of the large plan, how important that is to be able to meet all these needs. And of course, a lot of the projects in the collection and distribution system are also tied to future growth of the city and potential of, we're anticipating a number of projects to come out of the update to the comprehensive plan, where we need to increase our capacity either on the sewer collection system or the water distribution system. Next slide, please. And that gives you an idea, at least in the next 5 years, where the $585 million will be allocated. Under our usage and consumption, next slide, please. Here's a chart showing our demand. You can see it's, last year was, I think, the second wettest year on record with all the rain that we had all during the year. So you can clearly see that made an impact in 2020 on our water demand. So it was certainly much lower. Next slide, please. When you look at our, this is a breakout of our single family residential by tier. And we're starting to see a little bit of impact from COVID. More people were home, more people using water, more people were doing projects. And especially those customers that had the ability to do that, which is usually customers in a higher tier. So you can see, I think their percent increased, their usage increased. A lot has to do, I think, with COVID, even though it's been kind of trending in that direction. So next slide, please. So as far as proposed rates for next year, 35% of the overall utility budget goes towards personal services, 29% goes to operations and maintenance, 26% goes towards rate-funded CIP, and 10% goes towards debt service. Next slide, please. This chart shows you where we are now if we didn't increase rates, or compared to where we're proposing to increase rates over the next 5 years. And as you can see, there's less and less money annually as our O&M and debt service costs increase. There's less money to be able to be dedicated towards the rate funded capital program. Next slide, please. Similar to the last several years, there'll be modest increases to all the service charges and consumption charges. We'll continue a penny per tier increase for watershed protection. Customers will see different percentages based on their consumption and what tier they're in. Non-residential customers will continue to be billed at the tier 3 rate, and irrigation only will be at tier 5. We'll continue with the double rates outside the city limits, and of course any sewer charges that customers have or served by the county plant will be adopting the rates that the Durham County approves for those wastewater customers. Next slide, please. The rates, of course, will cover the operating budget, any increase for paper performance, PAYGO, CIP funding, debt funding, the water and sewer fleet replacement fund, and the general fund transfer. It'll maintain the necessary debt covenants, maintain adequate operating reserves of 180 days. Next slide, please. As you can see, this shows the current service charge rates, the current increase that we're proposing, and what the new rate will be. As you can see, 47-cent increase to the service charge, several cents in each of the tiered, a 50-cent increase to the service charge on the monthly sewer rate, and a 7-cent increase on the volume charge. Next slide, please. This shows you what the increase will actually do to each one of the tiers. So a tier 1 customer will go from $23.39 to $24.56, and so on across the chart. As you can see that all the increases are relatively small, especially with tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Next slide, please. So just to put it in, we wanted to show you, what that means, just to give you another sense of kind of how much those increases are. So the monthly increase for a tier 1 customer, it basically equals what you can buy a 20-ounce bottle of water for at the store, and then so on across the top. Or for tier 1, it's a 2/3 of a tall coffee at your local Starbucks. And then when we moved to the tier 3, we shifted out of coffees and went to donuts. So for how many donuts that equals. So, and then you can see at the bottom is shown what the total annual cost would be. So for a tier 1 customer with the rates that we're proposing, it's only going to cost a residential customer an additional $14.04 for the year. And for comparison, we would encourage everybody to find a bottle that they can reuse, because we have the best deal going, because you can buy a gallon of tap water from the city for 0.004 cents on the gallon. So we'd like to see more customers buy less of those plastic bottles and use more of bottles that can reuse with the great tasting City of Durham water. So next slide, please. And as far as our commercial customers, this shows a 5/8" meter, a commercial customer, and then a 1-inch meter, and then a 2-inch meter. Next slide, please. So currently what we're proposing is a 3.6% increase for fiscal year 22. It breaks out to a 3.9% increase on the water side and 3.5% for the sewer. There's of course a larger impact on the sewer side, so that averages it down to 3.6. Of course, the future increases, as I mentioned before, to be able to fund all the infrastructure renewal replacement programs and all the growth and development related projects, and also includes the impacts of the Jordan Lake project going forward. Next slide, please. As we do every year, we check in with the UNC School of Government Environmental Finance Center And we encourage all of you, when you get a chance, to utilize this tool just by going to the School of Government to be able to pull up this dashboard. It allows you to look at the utilities. You can look at, as you can see on the left, you can look at your water bill, you can look at your sewer bill, you can look at your water and sewer bill, and you can play with the bar underneath it of how many gallons. In this case, we have 4,000 gallons, which is near a typical tier 3 rate consumption. And then we've highlighted for comparison, instead of looking at all the utilities across the state, we highlighted the largest utilities to compare ourselves to, which are those that have more than 25,000 accounts. And you can see those dots across the screen there. When you look at the dials on the bill comparison, we rank, very, very favorably, because our, in this case, it's $54.33. So we're really low compared to a lot of our peers when it comes to that. We send a stronger conservation signal than that group, or on the stronger side. Cost recovery, we don't necessarily have as large a commitment, but we are trying to balance the needs of Durham and our capital improvement program. To move that dial way over higher up into the green, we'd have to investing more in the capital program, and we think the capital program is pretty robust as it is. So we think we're recommending a program that meets our needs. And then the bottom right, which is the most important dial on this screen, is affordability. They always tell you do not want your water and sewer bill to be over 2% of the median household income, and we're at 1.11 for our bills. Actually comparing our, next slide, please. Comparing the cost of 4,000 gallons with our peers per month, you can see we stack up pretty favorably with utilities that are in our area and some of the larger utilities across the state. So, we're also not, next, whoops, go back one. The questions, thank you. And we're also not proposing any changes to the capital facility fees for this year. With that concludes my presentation, and I open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greeley. I think once you showed the donuts, a few of my colleagues kind of lost their attention on your presentation. So if they pretend like they have questions, they really weren't listening, I can tell you. That was a great presentation, and we'll start with Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, I super want a donut now. Thank you, Mr. Greeley. That was really helpful. I always appreciate the details in these presentations about the water and sewer rates. And I'm always like amazed every time by just the sheer amount of money that it takes to maintain this system. And yeah, just billions of dollars. It's numbers that I have trouble wrapping my head around. So it's a huge responsibility, and I appreciate how y'all are always forward looking and how we're going to manage the system as we move forward. This is something that has just occurred to me lately because we've been encouraging people to build ADUs. And I know sometimes those ADUs run off the current water meter in the main house. And it occurs to me that if there is an additional family living in an ADU, that's going to, on one meter, that's going to bump people up into a higher usage tier. Do we have a way to like indicate that there are two structures on one meter so that people don't run into that issue?
The biggest issue that we've had in the past about the ADUs is more on the sewer side, because the gravity sewer system, and that, to be able to build that ADU structure and then pull a sewer service from the main is often very, very challenging. So what's been moved forward was to allow that ADU to connect to the existing plumbing of the existing house, under certain, of course, there's certain requirements for the lot itself, but the ADU is allowed because it's relatively much easier because of the water distribution system is under pressure to set a separate meter for the ADU. But so what we're seeing most frequently is a separate meter for the ADU to be able to charge the water and sewer service for the ADU, but the sewer actually physically being discharged in a common sewer line with the main house.
Got it. Thank you. So people who are building ADUs now are getting their own meters. Are people who already have them, like, can they just call and get a new meter?
Sure. You know, of course, there's an expense to set up a separate lateral, but they can do that.
Okay. And that's the only way that we have to do that. We can't somehow, we can't charge people less if they have a lower tier rate if they have an ADU running off of the same water line as their main house.
Because it's based off the meter itself, but they can certainly set up, make an arrangement with whoever is the owner of the main house to be able to how they distribute the bill.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Other questions? Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, real quick, the water hardship fund, so it'll reboot on July 1. Is that my understanding? Or
Correct.
is that the right understanding? Okay, so will there be kind of announcement? You know, I just want to make sure that we're going to send the same messaging to residents who may need support, who that it's open again, and so that folks can access that, since there are limitations to how folks can access throughout the year if they've already spent their credit.
Yes, that's part of our messaging all the time. So
okay, you know, just we know that a lot of the moratoriums are going away in, I think, June, and so there are going to be a lot of folks who have back rent, and I know we're standing up some robust rent assistance, and I know lots of folks are real cognizant of that, but the summer will present its own challenges, you know, financially for a lot of our residents.
I just want to point out Heidi Hackett and her team with Kathy Compton and Crystal Harris, that, you know, managing the CBF has done a great job, and all of the CBS staff has done a tremendous job in the outreach to our customers and continuing to, you know, when there's issues, to go out and not waiting for them to call us, but for us to go ahead and call them. So they've done a fantastic job in the outreach, and I think it's made a big difference. Our pre-COVID, we were turning off, averaging about 1,100 customers per month. And once you look at how we are past the initial, when we resumed cutoffs, if you ignore what happened in September and October, just because of the resumption, our average now is cut in half. And the last 2 months, last month, we only cut off 340 people, where in the past we were averaging 1,100, and some months we cut off 1,600 people in a month. And, you know, now it's down to just 340 people. And I think that in large part, it's the great job that all the people and the staff and CBS has done with the outreach and all the programs, and having the additional funding for the hardship fund. And that's just, and some of the changes that we've made with how the billing works. I mean, all of that put together, I think has made a tremendous impact, just by, when you just look at that number alone, going from over 1,100 and some months, 1,600 down to 340 customers.
I appreciate you sharing all of that. That's wonderful to hear. I also appreciate we beefed up that fund. It was definitely needed. It shows our commitment to our residents, and really appreciate all the work that your department has done to help our residents out in these really challenging times for so many folks.
Thank you.
Yes, I wanted to also shout out Heidi Hackett and her team, Don, and it's been interesting to watch this over the last couple of years, as you all have made efforts to improve this, if we put more money into it, but also if you've changed your processes, you built some other alliances, partnerships, and it's made a huge difference. So much appreciation to you all for that.
Happy to pass that on.
I have a question. I read in the memo, and I just wanted to make sure I got this right, that we, Durham's residential users, single-family residents use 47% less water than the national average. Is that true?
That's correct.
How does that happen?
Well, I'd like to first, since we're giving out kudos, I'd like to give a shout out to our water efficiency and conservation staff because they do a tremendous job. I think it's also our community partners that are, for industries and commercial residents that are water wise and water smart that have used to use less water. It goes into a lot of the renovation and new construction that's gone on in Durham with all the water efficient fixtures that are going now into buildings. I think the droughts that occurred, knock on wood, I hate saying that word, but the droughts that occurred between 2000 and 2010, certainly made a lasting impact with our customers and residents in Durham. So I think there was a concerted effort coming out of all of those droughts, especially the large drought in 07 and 08, is to really use water wisely, and that's carried us forward to. I mean, I look at that number, and once again, I'm like, this is awesome. To know how we compare and how well we do. So it's kudos to all. It's kudos to all our residents. So, but
I had the same reaction. I just thought it was awesome too. I just think that's an absolutely amazing figure, and I think it would be great if our public really understood that. And I think if they did understand it, it would even encourage them more towards conserving water, because I think to see that success is amazing. And we are in the middle of the water challenge. So if you haven't signed up for the water challenge yet, I can't remember the exact website, mywaterchallenge.com or something like that.
It's the mayor's challenge.
Yeah. So go take the water challenge, stop taking such long showers, and save us some water. Okay, go ahead, Charlie. You just got a haircut. You can take a really long shower. Next question for Mr. Greeley. Councilmember Reese.
I didn't really have a question, but I just wanted to, Mr. Greeley, thank you for all the work that you and your staff have put in over the last year and a half to trying to address the real human cost of COVID when it comes to our water system. There are water systems around the country that wish that their response had been as agile and as intentional as ours. And I know that your leadership is a big part of that. You've already mentioned Heidi Hackett and her staff. But I'm just always so grateful with the thought and the care that's gone into what can be a really challenging issue. Also wanted to say that because I got my hair cut, I'll be taking shorter showers. So you can thank me later as I continue to drop the average down. And just overall, I want to share, I want to draw a line under what the Mayor Pro Tem said. People have no idea the massive, massive investments that have to be made every year just to keep the system working the way it is now, let alone prepare for the inevitable growth that's coming for us. And I don't have anything close to the long-term strategic mind it takes to be able to structure a capital improvement program over multiple years to account for not only what we need to do now to keep clean water getting to our residents, let alone anticipate growth, where in the city it's going to be, how we're going to get that water, how we're going to get it where it needs to be. I'm just so amazed, and it's almost certainly the biggest difference between visibility and importance that exists in local government. And so I just wanted to say, this is your time for me to recognize you publicly for all the incredible work you and your entire staff of the water management. So thank you for that. I'm amazed. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And, we have a great team in water management and a lot of great support from the city manager's office as well as city council. So once again, it takes all of us working together to be able to be successful that we've done in the past, and we hope to be in the future. So thank you very much. I'll share that with everybody.
Thank you very much, Council Member. I just wanted to draw our attention again to the chart on page 15, which is the average daily consumption. We were consuming 30 million gallons a day in 2000. We're now consuming 25 million gallons a day. And we have a lot more people now. You know, when you think about the per person consumption and how it's dropped, it's truly amazing. It really is.
Yes.
All right, other comments, colleagues? Any more comments or questions? I think that we will get this will be on our consent agenda on Monday night. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Greeley. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
And we'll now move to item 18. Item 18 is, hang on a second. Trying to get back here into my agenda. Give me just a minute. Item 18 is PolicyLink Fines and Fees Justice Program Parking Pilots and Reform.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Pro Tem, and council members. My name is Erin Parrish. I work in the Budget and Management Services Department, and I'm going to give you all an informational update on Durham's work with the cities and counties for Fines and Fees Justice Program, which really just rolls off the tongue, specifically with the parking division. Next slide, please. So last spring, the city of Durham was chosen to be parts of the Cities and Counties for Fines and Fees Justice Program. This program involves examining the fines and fees that local government issues, identifying those that place a financial burden on low-income residents, particularly in communities of color, and proposing and implementing equitable reforms. So we're part of a cohort of 10 jurisdictions across the country that includes St. Paul, Chicago, Dallas, Philadelphia, and others. And our participation in the program includes technical assistance that we get throughout the year from national experts on racial equity and financial justice, including PolicyLink, Fines and Fees Justice Center, and the San Francisco Financial Justice Project. And as part of being part of this program, we're also we have a $50,000 grant to support community engagement, data analysis, and the piloting of reforms. Next slide, please. So we started this work in the summer. It's a one-year program, and we started by pulling together a great team of city staff and community representatives. And the work really comes in 3 phases. So the first phase was in the fall doing community assessments to understand which fines and fees had the greatest financial impact on residents, and also an internal departmental assessment to understand, what fines and fees we were issuing and which ones we had the most discretion to make changes about. And so from this work, we narrowed down our focus to 3 areas. One is parking citations. The next is weedy lots in neighborhood improvement services. And the last one is summer camp fees and aftercare programs with DPR. And so I will report on those 2 departments probably at the end of the summer at the end of the project. So in the winter and spring, that's the next phase of this project, which is data analysis. And we've been working on data analysis in these 3 departments, and also continuing with community engagement and stakeholder engagement with departments as well. And I'll say, all 3 departments have just been incredible collaborators all the way through. And finally, we're at the implementation stage, and that's the spring and the summer, and we're designing the policies and working to implement policies, pilots, and projects. There's a lot of alliteration in this presentation. Next slide, please. Great. So in the fall, we did departmental assessments, which were looking at the number of fines and fees that departments issued and that residents paid in a year. We looked at the revenue budgeted and collected from fines and fees, and the legal mandate we had for collecting these fines and fees. And this project primarily focuses on fines and fees that are punitive or that are difficult for residents to pay. And so there were kind of big buckets that we didn't look at We didn't look at development fees because these are primarily fees to compensate the city for services that developers use. And we didn't look at water and sewer fees because of the separate work. I mean, we just had a great 40-minute presentation on that, but separate work that's been happening with the CAFI project, with the National League of Cities, and that the water department is doing. Next slide. So at the same time as we were doing these internal departmental assessments, we were also doing community assessments. So our community representatives, Vanessa Mason-Evans and Alexandra Valladares and Laura Biediger and NIS were conducting community engagement to understand what kind of financial impact fines and fees were having on residents. So we had a questionnaire, but they used this questionnaire in a variety of ways. So put out on social media, sent out emails to community contacts, tabled outside of grocery stores, or used it as a prompt to have individual conversations with people. Next slide, please. So we heard from over 100 residents and 80% were Black or Latino. Next slide. And so the fines and fees that we heard were the most difficult to afford were parking tickets, water bills, and traffic tickets. And by far the most common response was parking tickets. Next slide, please. So there were several key insights that emerged from this engagement, specifically about parking tickets. The first was that late fees caused an increased financial burden when people were already struggling to pay the ticket itself. Next slide. The next was really COVID specific and really for people who were working downtown, who owned downtown businesses, that at the same time as they were really hit financially due to COVID-19, the cost of paying for parking or paying for a ticket became that much harder. Next slide. And finally, some residents just spoke about in general how the cost of paying for parking downtown was expensive in and of itself, but for paying for a parking ticket could make it prohibitive to go downtown. Next slide. So after community engagement, we moved on to data analysis, and Thomas Leathers in the parking division, chief parking administrator, got us an amazing data set of 4 years of parking citations. There were 65,000 entries and 85% of those had home addresses of where the cars were registered. And so we worked with researchers at NC Impact with the UNC School of Government to analyze this parking citation data. Next slide. I feel you, Councilmember Freelon, several of those were mine as well. Anyway, some of the key findings from the data were that most of the parking tickets with valid addresses were issued to non-Durham residents. For residents with local addresses, citations were equally distributed across all census block groups in Durham, regardless of race, ethnicity, or income. But what told a different story was people who received late fees or unpaid citations. Next slide, please. So for citations that had late fees or that went unpaid, these were disproportionately issued to residents who lived in block groups that were majority Black or Latino. Next slide, please. And the same was true when it came to income. So of the Durham residents who had late fees or tickets that went unpaid, 60% of these citations went to residents who lived in block groups with a per capita income under $35,000. And the disproportionality is actually starkest at the poorest block groups. Next slide. So the policies and pilots that I'm going to say we're proposing, this is really a result of a wonderful collaboration with the parking division, specifically with Chief Parking Administrator Thomas Leathers throughout this entire time. And we got to understand the amazing work that the parking division is already doing to support people who have trouble paying their parking tickets. And so as a result of this collaboration, of the community engagement that we did, the data analysis that we did, and the technical assistance that we received as being part of this cohort, we're proposing the following policies and pilots. So this includes a low-income ability to pay policies for parking citations, and 2 pilot programs that are designed to provide some financial support for downtown businesses and employees as these businesses begin to reopen at greater capacity. Next slide. So our technical assistance, specifically from the Financial Justice Project of the City and County of San Francisco, really helped to guide the creation of the income eligibility criteria that we propose using. And this is the income eligibility criteria for the ability to pay policies and also for the low-income downtown Durham employee pilot. So in the past 6 months, residents must have met one of the following requirements: receive government benefits such as food stamps, Medicare, unemployment insurance, and others. Your children are eligible for free or reduced lunch. You live in DHA property, are eligible for Section 8 housing or property tax assistance. You're experiencing homelessness, or your income was at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. And you can see what that income breakdown is by month and year below. Next slide, please. So the two parking citation ability to pay policies that we are proposing are late fee waivers and payment plans. So the late fee waivers would be for first-time citations for Durham residents who meet the income eligibility criteria that I just described. And payment plans would be for individuals who meet those income eligibility requirements regardless of their residency. And the structure for that payment plan that we're proposing would be that you would have a year to complete the payments, making monthly payments of at least 10% of the ticket cost. Next slide, please. So these next two pilots were designed in collaboration with Downtown Durham Inc. And they're really designed to provide economic support to downtown businesses and employees who've been hard hit by the COVID crisis. This first one is geared towards low-income Durham residents who work in downtown businesses and meet the income eligibility requirements that I described earlier. So they would receive up to 3 months of free daytime parking in one of the city-owned downtown garages. And we're using some of our grant funding to fund this, and we'll have funding enough for 80 people. Next slide, please. And the next pilot is really to encourage people to come on downtown safely and to spend time downtown, spend money downtown by offering free daytime parking in all of our city-owned parking garages the first week of May. Next slide, please. So what next? So that was a lot, but our work with the cities and counties for fines and fees justice let us take a closer look at parking citations. The parking pricing study that's happening this summer will include a larger evaluation of the cost of parking overall, particularly in the changing market conditions that we now face. And council will hear a report on the results of this study later this summer. Next slide. So none of this work would be possible without a really fantastic team, and I'd like to thank every one of them. First, Councilmember Freeman, thank you for your leadership and your concern and just the getting into the mix every step of the way. Chief Parking Administrator Thomas Leathers has been a joy to work with throughout this project. I think the city has a jewel in Thomas's gracious and welcoming leadership. Monica Krosky-Chaparro was team lead for parking and did an incredible job guiding it to where it is today in the midst of many other competing priorities. Vanessa Mason-Evans, Alexandra Valladares, and Laura Biediger continue to do an amazing job with engagement and outreach. Katie Dillard did a beautiful job with communications, and Amy Blaylock has been a huge help. I cannot say enough good things about the Office of Public Affairs. Tony Thompson, Sharon Williams, Faith Gardner, Clarence Harris, Emily Desiderio, and Anise Vance have provided wonderful support as team leads for DPR and NIS, as well as offering valuable guidance around racial equity, the inner workings of finance, and data analysis. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Also, Thomas Leathers and Fred Lamar are on the call to answer any questions about parking or the law that I cannot answer. And I'll say with the law, it's very, very few.
Ms. Parrish, thank you for that great presentation. I think this is something we've all been waiting to hear the results of, and we're very excited. So I'm just very, very grateful to you. I'm going to give Councilmember Freeman the first word here and see if she has any questions or comments that she would like to make.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share first. And I would love to just say that Erin stepped in when Ryan stepped out for the COVID task force. And I think it would go without saying that this work doesn't happen without really strong internal staff and external community partners. And Erin has been very on top of keeping us all on task and focused and organized. And I really want to thank her. And I think the rest of the team as well. I know Monica, Tony, and actually, sorry, I'm blanking her name right now, and Laura, all have been spending a lot of time on this, and I appreciate their departments allowing them to do this work, acknowledging that it could bring to fruition policies that actually help our residents like this. And so I really just want to say thank you to our internal staff for sparing some time for this project. And I really want to make sure that I note that Miss Vanessa and Alexandria, they both have really, really poured into. So when Miss Vanessa was speaking the other night about, you know, some of the things she was talking about and engaging with the city, she's talking about this work as well as other work and trying to get some of these things done so that people have the relief they need, acknowledging that COVID is impacting the Black community and the Latinx community in very harsh ways economically. And so I'm mindful of that, and this is phenomenal. And I'll continue to push as hard as I can where I can and try to find as many more grants as possible.
Councilmember, thank you for your leadership on it. It's really been a great, great project. And thank you so much for the work that you've done and the leadership you've given it. I also see Mr. Leathers and Mr. Lamar on here. Thank you all very much. And Mr. Leathers, you've had a great shout out from Ms. Parrish. And I think we have all watched your work over the years and just want to second that. All right, colleagues, questions and comments for Ms. Parrish or any of her colleagues. Mr. Lamar?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I could, Aaron did mention my name. I just want to state that our office has not really been involved in this initiative, but we look forward to working with the parking folks in working through the legal issues that might arise and trying to implement elements of the program. But at this point, we have not really been consulted. So just a forewarning that, you know, there may be legal issues that might have to be addressed, and we are ready to assist with those issues. So I just wanted to communicate that to this council.
Thank you so much.
I just want to note that for Mr. Lamar, I'll be happy to walk with you every step of the way in that.
All right, thank you. Colleagues, questions or comments from Ms. Parrish? Councilmember Middleton.
And Mr. Mayor, just by way of celebration, I just want to add my word of appreciation and celebration of this wonderful, wonderful work that's being done. Commendation to my colleague, Councilor Freeman. You know, when we're at NLC functions, the delegation from Durham gets to walk with quite a bit of swag because of the work and folk are noticing. And you know, we get to show up at the places and collect all the cool awards, but we know it's a staff and this team back here that's really doing the nuts and bolts work. I remember this is just a continuation of Durham showing up on the radar in bold initiatives like this that are leading the nation. And last year, we had the opportunity to be highlighted for our work with our expunction work and our work around water fees. And now this as well, it's just a continuing motif of Durham being really in the vanguard of doing the work of equity. And we know what our not so secret weapon is, the incredible staff, brilliant staff that does the lifting for us. So I just want to congratulate all of you and thank you for being the tip of the spear for Durham and doing this important work, making our policy match our values. Really, really, really exciting work. Just proud to be part of this team at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Freelon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I found this presentation to be really informative and wanted to extend my thanks. And when I was sworn in last fall, one of the very first meetings that I was a part of, we did the water analysis. And now seeing this analysis, it really makes me wonder, like, where else are these issues, like, everywhere, right? So, like, what are we? Okay, so we've done these pilots and we're learning and parking and water. What are the plans to dramatically, radically, institutionally, and structurally address this across the city?
I mean, I think that the space where we have the most space to grow is in local government partnership, right? Like the fat to trim in the city, honestly, is very little. But if we think about how we can work in collaboration with the city, with the county, with the court system, are there spaces with DHA? I think that's a space that's really exciting to think about how we as a city can continue to be a model and say, like, look, this is how we do it. This is how we create these programs that require work to do the administrative work. It requires some time to make things run smoothly. But once we're able to do that work as a city, to extend that hand across our local government to say, how can we do more? And that's where I'm really excited about where this could grow.
And if I could just add, Mr. Mayor, and to Councilmember Freeland, I love that question. I think that's exactly why I kept pushing, like, even though we already have this fines and fees grant, let's do this one too. The work of the team, I think, speaks volumes to what's possible, acknowledging that they brought in folks. I mean, the conversation has expanded into our criminal legal system, talking to our DA. I think we had conversations with the county, acknowledging, I didn't mention Faith, Anise, and Sharon. And Sharon made sure to pull in her county counterpart in the race equity conversation. And so they are putting tools in place. It's not just addressing the structures in institutions with policy, but actually putting the tools in place that actually capture the information and make sure that they're gathering it and using it in ways that do benefit building equity for everyone. So I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
I also thought, Madam Manager, go ahead.
I popped in on the screen to say just a couple of things. I wanted to thank this team that actually made this presentation today, but to also just say a few words about how this work that we do pilot sometimes, and Councilmember Freeland has talked about us piloting. Piloting is a great way to determine, whether or not something can be expanded and what resources are needed to actually expand it. That then helps us increase, our opportunity for success. But I could not say it better than Aaron and others have said. There's roles for everyone. So there are a lot of things that we can change, and we can change them with the partnerships that we have in the community, getting money from different sources, that have different rules around them, but putting all of those resources together for an outcome that benefits the residents. A lot of the ways that we've done things in the past, they have been done that way in the past, but there's nothing that keeps us from starting now and going into the future, looking for ways to create new ways that get us better outcomes. And that's what I'm committed to do. I'm committed to do it with the staff that we have here, who are very, very innovative. They're always going for grants. They're always looking for someone's hand to hold, and it's not easy work. It's really difficult work, but it's not too hard for us. So I don't pop in a lot, but I did want to pop in to connect to this presentation, and the reason that we were able to even do it, is because of money. The pilots are from money that is not tax dollars. It's money from a different source. And so we keep looking for those sources and looking for how they can be used. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Madam Manager. The other thought I have about and I think what Councilmember Freeland raised is really important. When I look on the slide, which fines and fees are the most difficult to afford? And when you look at the parking tickets, and this is what we're working on now, water bills, which is what we talked about 20 minutes ago. The third one, traffic tickets, is not in our purview. We don't own that. The police give traffic tickets, but a lot of that is done in court. But that's where we have taken our work to a really high level, exactly in the way you said, Ms. Parrish, which is that we've cross-cooperated with the court system, with the DA, with the judges, to do the great work on traffic relief from traffic fines and fees. And I think we're up to more than $3 million now in relief in that area. And you've been a part of that too, Ms. Parrish, a big part of that. So I think that continuing to find those opportunities across our local government is a great way to think about it. And I really appreciate you bringing that to us. What else, colleagues? Councilmember Freeman.
Oh, sorry. I have so many accolades to share. I can keep going. I'm not certain, but I do believe it was you, Mayor Schul, who implemented the innovation team. I know building out of Mayor Bill Bell's work, and with I'm not going to be able to say the name, but I know that it's the work of both you Mayor Bell and Mayor Schul, and building it out further to make sure that there's an innovative team that could be available to put these parts and pieces together. That has definitely paid off for the city, and I think moving the Dear program and the Welcome Home program and whatever else comes through. I think we right now have I think a request for proposals out right now for the universal basic income, and I think that once that comes online, you'll see some more opportunities there. And I'm sure once we start the conversations with those folks, the qualitative as well as the quantitative data will show through the stories there's even more areas. So thank you.
I wish I could claim credit for that. What usually happens is that staff comes up with a really good idea and they call it the mayor something or other, and then I sign my name. It's an awesome role, but unfortunately, I really can't claim much credit for it. But it's a really it's a wonderful group effort. All right, colleagues, what other comments and questions for Ms. Parrish? Do we have any more, or for Mr. Leathers? Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your being here, and we're looking forward to what's next. I will add that the city manager did announce the parking pilots at the Downtown Durham Incorporated annual meeting, and I was excited to hear them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parrish. Job well done. All right, now we're moving to another presentation, and this is item 19. Which is regarding the Poet Laureate. And this was brought to us by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. And there were some members of the public who were here to present. And I'm gonna ask if Mayor Pro Tem Johnson would introduce this exciting, very exciting item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was contacted by Crystal Smith, who's here with us today, about her idea to create a Poet Laureate position for the city of Durham. And I was really excited about it. And she agreed to come with some of her partners who are working on this initiative with her as well, to give us an idea of what this kind of program in the city would look like. So I just want to thank Crystal and her team for this fabulous idea and for being here with us today, and turn the floor over to them. Thank you.
Hello. I don't see myself, but I assume you guys can hear me.
We see you and hear you.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Pro Temp, and the City Council members. As Jillian said, my name is Crystal Simone Smith, and I'm a poet and local visiting fellow here at Duke University. I am with Dasan Ahanu and Chris Vitiello. Dasan, as many of you know, is a spoken word poet here, spoken word poet extraordinaire, I must say. And Chris is the Poetry Fox. And we are here to present a proposal for a Durham Poet Laureate position. And we can advance the slide. Okay, so why poetry matters? These are just a few quotes that you can take with you as you consider this proposal. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Poetry is a political act because it involves telling the truth. And poetry is a matter of life, not just a matter of language. To these quotes, I'm going to go ahead and add a rephrased statement that PEN America released yesterday. And that is, everyone is witness to the truths of our time, but it's the writers and the poets who capture and record these moments. They play essential roles in analyzing and critiquing government responses, documenting personal experiences, and inspiring us to imagine a better future. We can advance the slide. Okay, so city and town poet laureates. They're generally established by the City Council, and the position honors the achievements of a local poet who will serve as the city's ambassador in promoting public appreciation of poetry and literature with public readings and literary events. So right now we have 2 Poet Laureate positions surrounding us. Fred Joyner is the Poet Laureate of Carrboro, and CJ Sewitt is the Poet Laureate of Chapel Hill. So I think Durham certainly deserves that same sort of recognition. I've actually had the pleasure of going to events where Fred and CJ have spoken, and I think it truly enriches the events to have a poet present. Okay, so I am going to turn this over to, if Chris is on with me, Chris Vitiello, who will explain to us the logistics of setting up this position.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal, and thank you everyone, all representatives for giving us time today. I'm Chris Vitiello, longtime Durham resident and poet, and then also in recent years the Poetry Fox. So I've been spreading poems, one poem at a time, all over the place. And I know that representatives here, we have poetry well represented. Steve, I know that that you share a home with a poet, frankly, and of course Pierce is legendary already. There may be other poets in there in the mix as well that I don't know about already. So that's exciting. But I'm here really to, instead of giving a vision, kind of giving you the brass tacks type of stuff. So I'm really going to talk about 2 things: how a poet laureate could be selected, and what a poet laureate actually does. How a poet laureate is selected. We have some information here. This is a position that's going to serve sort of at the pleasure of the mayor in a way. But the 3 of us, Crystal, Dasan, and I, are sort of coming forward as a city poet laureate committee or panel that could select from among applicants and nominees a poet laureate, and hand that on to this group for ratification. Is sort of the process that would be in place. The members of the City Poet Laureate Committee would change over time. We would serve for a certain period of time and then rotate off, that type of thing. So the choosers would be different. And if we could move to the next slide. We thought long and hard about how poets could be nominated or could nominate themselves, and our priorities were really a complete attention, thorough attention to inclusion in a nomination process. There would basically be an online form. So just from a practical standpoint, you go online to a form and nominate yourself, or you go onto the form and nominate somebody else. The qualifications that we would be looking for, and I think this would be the next slide, please. Thank you. We're looking for somebody who lives in the city, has been here for at least a couple of years, and is going to stay in the city for their whole appointment. And we've been talking about an appointment of 2 years as a poet laureate. So it would be not just 1, but 2 years. They should have some kind of publication history, but publication history can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different poetry communities. There are some poets who have multiple books and awards and, the sort of maybe academic credits. And then there are other poets who publish exclusively in the form of like TikTok videos or on YouTube or on a blog. These are, we don't want to delegitimize any form of poetry or any form of publication history. So this is an important thing that we've paid attention to, and I think certainly for Durham would need to be a crucial part of the qualifications of a nominee. So you can see some other things here: a previous commitment, 18 years or older, just some basic stuff, so we don't get any 7-year-old poet laureates, which might be fun, but probably not the greatest idea in the world. If we could move to the next slide. So what a poet laureate actually does. I think Crystal sort of talked about, just very briefly mentioned some of the things that Fred and CJ do in Chapel Hill and Carrboro. Basically, a poet laureate has sort of 3 duties as we see it. They are a teacher, they are an advocate, and they are an artist. The teacher side is, it's about engagement and advocacy just as much as it is about writing poems or reading poems at ceremonial events. This is really about championing poetry, letting everybody know the power of it, which I think people maybe are understanding a little more than in the past because of readings at ceremonial events. Like, I think all of you are not finding yourself waking up in the morning and thinking about the words that Chuck Schumer said aloud at the Biden-Harris inauguration. Certainly I've forgotten whatever he said. I just know he was there. We are thinking about what Amanda Gorman said at the inauguration. And this is the kind of power and shift of language that a poet brings to the table. So reading at ceremonial events, being available to be asked to write a commemorative poem or an invocation, some type of a commission for an event, opening a new building, making an important announcement. These are the kinds of things that poets can really add to the political work of a city, frankly. And of course, just being an advocate, attending cultural events, library events, festivals, things like that, and doing their thing and being the city poet laureate is great visibility for poetry, but also really just conveys a certain kind of value of the arts and of public language that I think Durham has always held dear. And then just sort of the nitty gritty, we have this last bullet on this slide, a certain guaranteed number of public readings and workshops, open workshops that will be free to anyone, including schools to, visits to schools. It could be really kind of anything. I mean, poets can kind of go into any space. I'm sure if you talk to Crystal and Dasan and me, and we listed all the places that we've done workshops, it would probably take the rest of the afternoon until sunset. Poets go into prisons and teach, poets go into daycares and, just any space, poets are doing the work. If we could go to the next slide, and then I'll sort of close up. The last thing is the dollars side of it. We're talking about a 2-year length of term. And generally, when you're talking about a city poet laureate, the honorariums are around $2 to $3 grand for that period. We'd of course love that to be, as big a number as possible, because 2 years is a good appointment. But we haven't talked to you guys about the budget, but I would think that like $3 grand for 2 years is still a really good deal, I think, on a poet's time. So that's the basic scope of how to be selected. A nice, open, and inclusive process, absolutely crucial for all of us. And what they would do, being a teacher, being an advocate, and being a great working artist would be the big things. So now I want to turn it over to Dasan to close up our presentation.
Yes. So what we have here is a sample timeline, just to give an example of what the process might look like. Here we have these tentative dates. You start with the call for nominations, and that would be open for 60 days to offer a deadline for the nominations to be received. There would be a panel, a committee or a panel that would be pulled together to select the finalists. Then you'd have a month later, the city board, like recommendations are submitted to the mayor's office or the city council, will move forward for approval. Then after that, the selection is made. And then the announcement of that following January for the city board laureate to be notified in a public announcement plan. So this is just an idea of the process. There are some points to figure out in terms of who is responsible for each step of this process, but this will give an example of what a process of selection would look like. And so if you can move on to the next slide. One of the things that we believe is important is, as we advocate for this role, is to not end this presentation without offering some of what we're talking about, that exemplifies the power that this art form has and what we know it can do for our community. This is For Trayvon Martin by Reuben Jackson. Instead of sleeping, I walk with him from the store. No Skittles, thank you. We do not talk much. Sneakers crossing the courtyard. Humid southern night, we shake hands and hug. Ancient, stoic tenderness. I nod to the moon. I'm so old school. I hang till the latch clicks like an unloaded gun. So that is our presentation. We thank you. We hope that we get a chance to move forward with this, and we look forward to this project moving forward. Thank you.
Wow, that was fantastic. I'm going to read a poem from the poet that I live with, that Chris mentioned. I was trying to decide which one to read, but then when Chris was talking about poets that teach in prisons, I knew the one that I wanted to read. This poem was recently published in a magazine called Barzak, a wonderful poetry magazine, and it's called Attending the Hearing for Darrell Hunt, wrongfully convicted and incarcerated for 19 years. Sitting together in the hearing, your foot tapping, shirt damp with sweat, you insisted on sitting in the same courthouse that locked you up for 19 years, 9 of them after proof of your innocence. Your body took over, tapping your feet in a song of post-traumatic stress, surrounded again by officials who wanted to lock you away. You, courageous as any military officer, stood your ground, knowing that your body, your being, was physical evidence of their transgressions. You returned to the scene of the crime, theirs, for one reason only: to protect the next person, to keep the next 19-year-old from being swept up in a murderous search, even though he was not, had never been a murderer. The only person you harmed was yourself, by helping over and over until your body refused. Maybe you shouldn't have offered, maybe we shouldn't have asked, no matter whose life it saved. Maybe you should have said no and only no, until you could find a way to stay safe from the terror they had injected into your body. So I live with a poet, and I love living with a poet. And now I'm going to turn it over to our poet, Councilmember Freelon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was beautiful. Hey, y'all. Good to see you. Some familiar faces. I love the presentation. I'm totally down. I was so jealous that Carborough Chapel Hill got Poet Laureate before Durham did. That just felt hella like not cool. I only have one comment on the whole presentation, which is the salary just seems very low to me. Like $2,000 to $3,000 for a 2-year gig. That's, you know, when you add up the amount of things we'll probably be asking them to do, that might even be like not even a living wage. And so, you know, I was thinking, I knew the numbers would come up, but in my head I was thinking closer to $10,000 for, you know, $5,000 a year, something like that, just to, because it's important to tell the artists that we value their time. Like, I don't know what Jackie Shelton Green is getting at the state level or what else they're doing, but I don't want to do $2 to $3 grand because that's what Carborough's doing. Like, you know, there's probably a higher bar we could raise for ourselves, and I'm all for this, except that part personally. Yeah.
Pierce, we are happy to change that slide to $10,000.
I just want to speak on that really quickly. So a lot of the information that's in that slide comes from the poetsandwriters.org website, and they sort of have a standard of how these things work, and they're kind of the same in each city. When I look at that salary, it makes me want to weep, but that's kind of what it is. It's kind of the standard. I know CJ and Fred get just around that amount, and most city poet laureates do. I also know that it doesn't limit you to doing events outside of that, that could be paid events. So if someone wants you to come to their house, if there's some other event that you want to do where somebody's offering you an honorarium, you can certainly do that as well. And if you are elected Poet Laureate, you would get a lot of those sort of invitations, I assume. So it doesn't limit your income in that way. But you do have the 5 to 10 things that you are recommended or you're required to do throughout the 2 years or each year. So I guess it depends on how enthusiastic you are as a Poet Laureate, right? You might want to be at every event, you might want to be at every festival, every ribbon cutting. That's, entirely up to the individual. But that's really the going salary, unfortunately. And again, as Chris said, if you would like to pay your Poet Laureate more, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you very much. So I'll just say, I had contemplated this a lot before when I appointed the public historian. And the reason that I didn't do it a while back is just because of the Piedmont Laureate. And I was sort of thinking, are we competing with the Piedmont Laureate? But especially if we have laureates in other cities, I think that argument doesn't really hold up. And so I'm really so grateful to you all for bringing this to us. Other comments, colleagues? Anything else from Councilmember Freelon first, I think I'll say. Anything else on your mind? Okay.
No. I guess in response to the idea that that's the standard, I'm not afraid of doing something different. And I actually think that's just, 20 events over the course of 2 years at $2,000, like $100 an event, which, I just feel like we can do better and should do better. Hopefully other cities will follow our lead. But that's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Freeman, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would second that motion of Councilmember Freelon, acknowledging that I think the artists should be paid a little bit more than the $2,000 to $3,000. I thought that was off-putting. I will just note, I think that it's a good idea to incorporate the cultural advisory board in this conversation and figuring out how to weave them into this work, because I think it's something that there should be more around it than the laureate and the mayor, or the laureate and the council. I think it should be something that's community rooted in a way that supports some of the artists that are here in our community. Because if there are programs or possible pilots that could come forward, I think that partnership between the laureate and an advisory board would be helpful, especially in making recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we all saw a few years ago when Governor McCrory appointed an unsuccessful poet laureate, someone who the community was really very unhappy with. And so I think that the community input is going to be very crucial, and you all have thought about that, and I appreciate Councilmember Freeman's comment as well. Other comments, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to thank y'all so much for bringing this to us. And I agree about the salary. I would love to pay more. I wanted to ask Councilmember Freelon also about the Cultural Advisory Board, whether you could be kind of our conduit for that to, kind of get their feedback. It would push back the timeline a bit, but I also think it's important to get some community input and to get their ideas about that question of the appointment, whether it should be the mayor or the council or the board or some other community created group that would actually do the appointment.
Sure. Yeah, I will email the board chair and put that on the next agenda.
Awesome, thank you.
I think that sounds great. I do think that one way in which the timeline could be shortened is the time between the city poet laureate recommendation submitted and the mayor selects, or however the selection is to happen. I certainly don't think that needs 2 months. I think that can happen more quickly. So I think that, yeah, I think that it's a good idea to, I really like the Mayor Pro Tem suggestion and Councilmember Freeman's idea about going to the Cultural Advisory Board. So other comments? Councilmember Reese?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say how excited I am about this possibility. I actually was reading on Twitter, I think it's Chapel Hill that recently did kind of an update on their Poet Laureate program. And I read through the presentation that they had at their town council meeting. I want to say it was last night or the night before. Yes, by the way, this is how I spend my time when I'm not in our meetings, is following along other town meetings. But I'm assuming that I latched onto it on Twitter because I knew this item was going to be on our agenda today, or else I'm just really bored. So I just wanted to say how excited I am about that. The presentation to the Chapel Hill Town Council did mention the low pay as a concern. So I'm happy to see Councilmember Freelon stepping up for his poetry brethren and sister and to say that's not going to work. Also, just wanted to say that I dropped in the chat a link to a Twitter post that I made in August of 2017, which my friend Chris Atella will remember was the night that the Poetry Fox visited the Durham City Council and did a reading. So if you want to slide past the photo that is a picture of me in my seersucker suit with the Poetry Fox, although feel free not to cruise past, that's fine too. But the other photo attached to that is the poem that he read at the council meeting that night. I was really excited to bring the Poetry Fox to the council that night, and I look forward to supporting a proposal around a Durham Poet Laureate so that we can see more poetry in our chambers and throughout our city. I think that's really important. I was tempted to read the Poetry Fox's poem about Durham today, but then Mr. Mayor, you read your wife's amazing poem, and I think I'll just let that slide right now because I could not do Chris's work justice. And so, but the link is there, the poem's there. It's actually pretty cool. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Middleton and then Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. And hello, poets. Good to have you with us. Dasan, I think the last time I saw you, I was serving as a judge for a poetry slam that Stand Up, Speak Out had a couple years back. And I hardly could pay attention to judging the poets because I was so caught up in the wonderful work that was going on there. So it's good to see you and your comrades. If you were to think about a city in North Carolina that would have a poet laureate, it just seems such a Durham thing. It's almost kind of like, yeah, if anybody's gonna have a poet laureate, it would be Durham. So I want to echo the fact that Chapel Hill is kind of ahead of us is deeply disturbing to me, and we need to go into closed session and do something about that. I don't know what we can do, but it just feels wrong. I mean, we're Durham. Shout out to my friends in Chapel. they're a great city. So yeah, I'm really excited about this presentation and the possibility and prospect of us having a poet laureate. It just feels like an organic and natural extension of the spirit and DNA of Durham. So absolutely. I do want to ask a question because if we're using the term honorarium or salary, if we use the term salary, what type of implications does that bring with it from the city's point of view? And I don't know how the cities are doing it. Do we have to have a hard job description then if we call it a salary? Is that person officially a city employee as opposed to an honorarium? Are they? I'm just wondering if folk could give me an understanding of the nuts and bolts of it. I hang out with some people that are going to ask. That's why I raise this. So I'm just wondering what are the implications of calling this person an employee or a salary receiver from the city? And then maybe staff can speak to that. Or
Good afternoon. So there are some technical answers to what you just asked, council member. Certainly we have folks that we pay as kind of like contractors or consultants. They're not employees. They do receive tax documentation for the funding, and that would be anyone that's receiving city funding over a certain dollar figure, whether someone is an employee or some other, type of relationship with the city, depends on how much control they have and what they're doing, whether they have supervision or not. There's things around benefits and hours. So it's probably not a discussion for in here, but it is an administrative thing, in the background that can be handled. It just depends upon what the will of the council is. But the dollar amount is not that.
Right.
It's not that discussion.
Right. Yeah, I'm not so much concerned about the dollar amount as I am. Staff can just, if would do some research and some due diligence for me. If we call it an honorarium or stipend or salary, whatever, does that need to be tethered to a per event? Does that raise the prospect that we have to have at least X number of events per year tethered to that stipend or honorarium? Or you understand what I'm asking? So if you can get some sense of that, maybe some of our sister cities have done in that way. I'm just curious, because I know questions will come to me on that. But all for the idea. I think this is exciting and overdue for Durham, actually. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Madam Manager.
We'll get some follow up to you.
Thank you.
To the council.
Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for all the presenters and for the Mayor Pro Tem bringing this item. I am from the land of Gabriela Mistral and Pablo Neruda. Poetry runs very deep in my people. My sister is also a poet, and she's a pretty amazing writer. And I just am really excited about this, and definitely think that the honorarium should be at a higher value.
I'll tell you one more poetry story from my family. My wife has always wanted to visit Chile and go to the homes of Pablo Neruda. So we talked to Javier about where to go, and we had a big trip. Finally, she saved her miles on her air miles to take us down there. And on March she was going to go for 2 weeks, and I was going to join her for 2 more. She was going to be there a month. So on March the 7th, 2020, she got on a plane and went to Chile. You may remember that a global pandemic was in the process of happening. And I said, baby, you really should come home. She said, no, I got to go to Neruda's houses first. So she took the tour. She got on literally the last plane out of Santiago a week later. I never got to join her, but she did get to go and see Neruda's houses. And so, yeah, it's a great proposal. Let me suggest this, colleagues, and I think this is in the spirit of what the Mayor Pro Tem suggested, is that we ask Councilmember Freelon and the administration to take this to our Cultural Affairs Board to look at this and to come back to us with, working with these poets to say in a month to bring us. Is that possible, Councilmember Freelon? I don't know exactly when they meet.
Yeah, I'm actually composing the email right now. I'm just kind of CCing Dasan and our chair, vice chair, and staff folks. So
super.
Yeah.
So I think let's hope for it in a month. That I'm not sure exactly what their meeting schedule is, so we don't want to be too prescriptive. But come back to us with a response to this and kind of fleshing it out with the help of Mr. Ahanu, Ms. Smith, and Mr. Vidiello. We really appreciate your being here. This is super exciting. And thank you so much for bringing it to us. Any final comments?
You're
that you all
welcome.
might have?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. And I don't know when Councilmember Freelon's going to start his ciphers again up at the Bull, but is that happening?
I mean, once it's safe to go out there and spit, literally.
Well, Mr. Mayor, he's now about to be a published author, so he's got a lot of work to do. on his book coming out next fall, by the way, Daddy Daughter Day. Look for it on the
that's
bestsellers
great.
list.
That's awesome.
My publicist, Charlie Reese, ladies and gentlemen.
He's a very good publicist. He's very good. Well, okay, this wasn't our usual item nor our usual discussion, but it was a lot more fun than some. So we are grateful to you. Thank you so much. Good to see all of you all, and we admire you. We appreciate you, and let's do this.
Mr. Mayor, before you move on, I was just going to note that you might want to pull general services into that conversation. I think they have a pretty good feel for how to set that up internally, logistically. They did it with the Black Artistry Project, and they're working that out now. So,
thank you. We'll get the Cultural Advisory Board to bring them in as needed. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right, friends. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for bringing us that. And now we got one more item. I know you thought this. Do we want to settle the agenda before we go into closed session, Madam Manager, and or do we want to go to closed session first?
That's clerk.
Yeah, we'll get to the clerk. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor and Madam Mayor Pro Tem and City Council, I wanted to give you the results of your nomination to the Mayor's Hispanic Latino Committee. Council has nominated Raimundo Garcia to the position that is available, and that is the only nomination today. So I'm all finished.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager, do we want to go ahead and settle before we go into closed session? Okay, go ahead then. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, we have for consent items 1 through 15 and item 17. We have on our general business agenda, item 16, and GBA public hearings, items 20 through 22.
Could you say that again? I'm sorry, Madam Manager, I missed it.
Okay, we have for consent, items 1 through 15 and item 17. For our general business agenda, we have item 16. And for our general business agenda public hearings, item 20 through 22.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Manager. Colleagues, you've heard the manager's recommendation to settle the agenda. Can we have a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, seconded by Councilmember Caballero. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Schewel?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero?
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon?
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Middleton?
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. We will now need a motion to go into closed session to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by the city pursuant to NCGS 143-318.114.
I move this, right?
Mr. Mayor,
yes,
I did receive some information from staff that NCGS has one correction in it. It has an A before the 4.
Thank you. 143-318.11A4 then, I think.
That's correct.
Thank you, Madam Manager. And I heard Councilmember Middleton's motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Schewel?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero?
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon?
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton?
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously, and we're now going to move into closed session. I'll ask everyone that does not need to be at this session to please go ahead and log off. I think what we will do, colleagues, would you all like to take a 5-minute break? Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 4:08 p.m.